Chapter 1127. Am I talking to a dog? Yi Xian looked at Daoyun Saint King from the corner of his eyes. His attitude was overbearing. Being humble and polite had nothing to do with Yi Xian. He knew that in this world where the strong were respected, only by displaying unparalleled strength could one gain the recognition of others. Because the weaker you were, the easier it would be for others to bully you. The more vicious and overbearing you were, the more you would gain the respect of others. Of course, all of this was based on strength. If one did not have the same strength, it was no different from seeking death. As for Yi Xian, he could clearly see through himself. Although he was only a great sage, according to his estimations, he wouldn't be at a disadvantage even if he fought against the great sage king. Moreover, with the trump cards he possessed, it wasn't impossible for him to kill the great sage king. Therefore, before heading to the Tianyuan kingdom, he had to show his might and let the three saint kings know that he, Yi Xian, was not a weak lamb, but a true tiger. When Yi Xian displayed his overbearing attitude, the three saint kings' expressions changed. They all looked at Yi Xian with a gloomy expression. Daoyun Saint King's killing intent spread out. Are you courting death? Dong! 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 Daoyun Saint King walked towards Yi Xian. The entire palace rumbled. A terrifying great Saint King aura burst out. Endless killing intent pressed towards Yi Xian. He. Old Mother Juku covered her mouth and teased, "Brother Yi, you are really arrogant. Looks like Daoyun will have to teach you a lesson. Don't worry, fellow Daoist Yi. I've already prepared a good coffin for you. After you die, I'll collect your corpse. You can be considered to have died a worthy death," Sage King Yin Hai said sinisterly. "Leave that coffin to collect your mother's corpse," Yi Xian said coldly. As the saying goes, the first to gain the upper hand, the second to lose. He would not be controlled by others. A terrifying chaotic light burst out from his body as he charged towards Daoyun Saint King. Rumble. It was as if mountains and rivers were collapsing, as if the universe had exploded. Yi Xian's actions were too terrifying. He slapped his palm towards Saint King Daoyun, and the heavenly punishing halberd shot out towards Saint King Yin Hai. He actually wanted to fight against two Saint Kings by himself. How dare you! The expressions of the two Saint Kings changed. Daoyun Saint King also sent a palm strike towards Yi Xian while Yin Hai Saint King took out a trident and clashed with the sky-destroying halberd. Bang! Chaotic light twisted the space as extremely terrifying explosions rang out. The entire Taichu's sacred palace was reduced to dust by the attacks of the three of them. The terrifying shockwaves from the explosions expanded in all directions. Rumble. The mountains were collapsing, and the trees were turning into ashes. Dust and smoke filled the sky like a Tongtian tornado, accompanied by the angry roars of killing. Bang! The Dao Cloud Saint King's fist smashed onto Yi Xian's chest, but Yi Xian didn't dodge with a cold smile on his face. His right palm seemed to pierce through the heavens and earth as he mercilessly sent the Dao Cloud Saint King flying. That was not the end. Yin Hai Saint King appeared behind Yi Xian out of nowhere. His Yin Hai trident went straight for Yi Xian's back, and there was an ear-piercing shriek from all directions. Clang! Yi Xian didn't even turn his head as he swept out with his halberd. The Yin Si trident shattered inch by inch, turning into a cold light that filled the sky and dissipating. The Yin Si Saint King was sent flying by this enormous force. What a terrifying physical body! Old Mother Juku no longer had a smile on her face as she looked at Yi Xian in astonishment. Although Yi Xian had only exchanged blows with the two Saint Kings, the battle prowess he'd unleashed in an instant caused her to be extremely shocked. So, it's just two pieces of trash. I really thought that you two were capable. Yi Xian stood with his halberd in hand. A sinister sneer hung on his face as he revealed a domineering attitude that looked down on the world. Although his words were extremely arrogant, Yi Xian was secretly surprised. A great Saint King was indeed a great Saint King. He was not someone that Saint King Hun Tian, who had just entered the Saint King realm, could compare to. If Saint King Hun Tian had been in Yi Xian's place, he would have been severely injured. However, these two Saint Kings were not injured at all. Their blood just kept churning in their bodies. What an arrogant junior. Today, you will die without a burial place. The two Saint Kings came together. An extremely terrifying aura of a Saint King exploded out as they looked at Yi Xian with eyes that were filled with killing intent. Kill! The two Saint Kings brandished their Saint King great arts, causing the entire sky to dim. The terrifying laws of primal chaos wreaked havoc as they charged towards Yi Xian. This was a Saint King grand art that could suppress all enemies. When the two of them realized that Yi Xian's physical body was unparalleled, they naturally would not fight him in close combat. Millstone of slaughter. Rumble. Yi Xian let out a low roar. His hands formed seals, bringing out the boundless laws of primal chaos. A terrifying dark millstone condensed and revolved in front of him, releasing a murderous aura that pierced through the heavens and the earth. Destroy. Yi Xian pushed with both hands, and the millstone of slaughter rotated the heavens and the earth, directly striking towards the two holy kings. The rolling and rotating holy light directly destroyed the heavens and the earth, and the power that erupted from it was simply shocking. Bang! The two Saint Kings sent out beams of saint light that pierced through heaven and earth, wanting to shatter Yi Xian's millstone of slaughter. However, even though Yi Xian was only a great saint, the power in his body was as vast as the ocean. How could the grand art that he condensed be so easy to break? Boom! The two beams of saint light were directly shattered by the millstone of slaughter, and suddenly smashed into the bodies of the two Saint Kings. The two of them could not dodge in time, and a mouthful of blood spurted from their mouths. Their bodies were sent flying, and it was unknown how many mountains they crashed through. Junior, you've gone too far. The two Saint Kings returned with a loud bang, but blood flowed from the corners of their mouths. Clearly, Yi Xian's grand art had not made things easy for the two of them. However, the two of them looked at Yi Xian with extremely serious eyes. Come, let this saint see what other abilities the so-called great Saint Kings have. Buzz! Yi Xian swung the heaven-destroying halberd, and pointed it at the two Saint Kings. The chaotic qi that exploded the heaven and earth shot up into the sky, and the power that looked down upon the heaven and earth was released in a terrifying manner. Stop! Suddenly, before the three of them could attack again, Tailing Saint King and Old Mother Juku stood in front of the three of them. My three friends, we've already fought. Don't spoil the harmony because of a little quarrel. Tailing Saint King hurriedly tried to dissuade the three of them. Inhai, Daoyun, we're not here to start a feud. We've been invited by Taoist Tailing to explore the Tianyuan kingdom together. Although Brother Yi is a great saint, his battle strength is completely on par with us. Old Mother Juku raised her eyebrows and said. Humph. Daoyun Saint King snorted coldly, but he still withdrew his aura. Inhai Saint King looked at Yi Xian coldly, and withdrew his aura as well. The battle also disappeared. Chapter 1128. However, the two of them had seen Yi Xian's combat power. Although they still looked calm on the surface, they had already treated Yi Xian as someone of the same level. Moreover, none of the people present had lived for a short period of time. They were all scheming and astute people, so it was impossible for them to fight to the death with Yi Xian just because of a verbal dispute. This wouldn't do them any good. Yi Xian kept the heaven-destroying halberd in his body. He also knew that going too far was as bad as falling short. Since the two of them had stopped fighting, he naturally could not make a move. After all, Tianyuan Kingdom was the most important. Soon, the five of them all returned to the holy land of Taichu. However, the battle just now had destroyed the Taichu temple. At this moment, they could only sit cross-legged in the void. Obviously, they were going to discuss about Tianyuan Kingdom. The chaotic world was so simple. The three of them who were fighting to the death just now could sit together in the blink of an eye. Because everyone only cared about their own interests, what happened just now was just an act of testing each other. Yi Daoyu, your cultivation is really good. If there is a chance, I will have to learn from you again. Dao Yun said coldly. Yi Daoyu, I don't have many friends in Yinhai, but I want to make friends with you. After this matter of Tianyuan Kingdom is over, if Yi Daoyu is free, you can come to Yinhai as a guest. We will definitely welcome you. Yinhai Saint King nodded to Yi Xian. The attitude of the two Saint Kings changed greatly. They were no longer as contemptuous as before. This was also a kind of affirmation for Yi Xian. After all, in their Saint King realm, it was better to have more friends than more enemies. Okay. Yi Xian nodded slightly. He could see that in the chaotic world, strength was the only thing that mattered. There was no such thing as right or wrong. If you were strong, you would be welcomed with a smile. If you were weak, you should die. Winner takes all. The strong preyed on the weak. This sentence fully explained the way of survival in the chaotic world. Ha! Tailing Saint King rolled his eyes and laughed loudly. I am relieved to see that you are all living in harmony. But before we go to Tianyuan Kingdom, we still have to say something first. Yes, how should we distribute the treasures in Tianyuan Kingdom? Old Mother Juku said solemnly. When it came to business, the five suddenly became silent. After all, the distribution of the treasures had to be agreed in advance. If there were disagreements after entering Tianyuan Kingdom, it would be a great hidden danger. I won't say anything else. I was the one who discovered the Tianyuan Kingdom, and I was the one who brought the four of you there. I want 40% of the treasures inside. Sage King Tailing broke the silence first. 40%? The faces of the three saint rulers changed. Their faces immediately sank. Saint King Yinhai said sinisterly, Big Brother Great Spirit, although you brought us into the Tianyuan Kingdom, isn't 40% a little too much for you? And at this moment, only Yi Xian didn't express his opinion. The three Saint Kings also looked at Yi Xian. Clearly, Yi Xian had a great say in the distribution of the treasures. Yi Xian's expression was calm. With a flip of his palm, a treasured gourd appeared. As he pulled out the mouth of the gourd, a strand of 9-colored clouds gushed out, accompanied by an extremely terrifying sound of thunder. 9-colored divine lightning? Old Mother Juku roared in shock. Her face paled instantly. She suddenly stood up and took a dozen steps back. She looked at Yi Xian in shock. Not only Old Mother Juku, but the other three were the same. They all stood up in panic and kept a safe distance from Yi Xian. The four of them never thought that Yi Xian would have such a terrifying item in his hands. The four of them looked at Yi Xian with fear in their eyes. Extreme fear flashed through their eyes. How do you have the 9-colored divine lightning? Saint King Tailing roared, trembling. He asked the question that was on their minds. The 9-colored divine lightning can destroy all things. In the past, I encountered this strand of 9-colored divine lightning by chance. It took me thousands of years to collect it. There's no need to be afraid, Yi Xian said indifferently. He closed the gourd again and the 9-colored mist disappeared before their eyes. Yi Daoyu, what is the meaning of this? Saint King Yinhai frowned. Nothing much. I just want to tell the four of you that I want 20% of the treasures in the Tianyuan Kingdom. As for how the other 80% will be distributed, it has nothing to do with me. I only want my share. Yi Xian lightly said. The 9-colored divine lightning was a product of the mutated chaotic saint trial. When Yi Xian underwent the chaotic saint trial, he had already refined the 9-colored divine lightning into his body. It was not just the 9-colored divine lightning. There was also the chaotic 5-colored fire. Yi Xian had also refined it for his own use. It was one of Yi Xian's trump cards. However, Yi Xian obviously would not tell them the truth. He made up a lie and then showed them the 9-colored divine lightning to scare them off. As expected, the 4 Saint Kings' faces were heavy. They were extremely afraid of Yi Xian's gourd. They did not reject Yi Xian's suggestion immediately. The 9-colored divine lightning was extremely terrifying. Even the Supreme Saint Kings did not dare say that they could withstand it. After all, the 9-colored divine lightning was extremely famous in the chaotic world. The divine lightning it contained could severely injure Saint Kings. Fortunately, Yi Xian only had a strand of 9-colored divine lightning. Although they were afraid, it was not much of a threat to them. However, when Yi Xian showed them the 9-colored divine lightning, Yi Xian's status in their hearts rose again. They could not directly reject Yi Xian's request and offend Yi Xian. Unfortunately, the 4 of them did not know that Yi Xian had actually refined the 9-colored divine lightning. If they knew, they would definitely team up and treat Yi Xian as their number 1 enemy. Brother Yi has a strand of 9-colored divine lightning. It's extremely useful for breaking the seal. I have nothing to say if he wants 20%. Great Spirit Saint King was the first to express his opinion. What about the 3 of you? Yi Xian held the gourd in one hand and smiled at the other 3 Saint Kings. I have no problem either. Dao Yun said in a low voice. 20% it is. Saint King Yin Hai shook his head helplessly. Brother Yi is indeed capable. I have no problem either. Old Mother Juku said. In an instant, Yi Xian kicked the ball back to the 4 of them. He had already decided on 20% of the treasure. As for how the remaining 80% would be divided among the 4 of them, it was up to them. Big Brother Great Spirit, 40% is too much. The 3 of us cannot accept it. Saint King Yin Hai looked at Great Spirit Saint King and said. That's right. Yi Dao Yu has already taken 20%. If Great Spirit Saint King takes 40%, then the remaining 40% will be divided among the 3 of us. Isn't this a greater loss than trading with the 3 of us? Old Mother Juku said coldly. I agree with the 2 of you. Saint King Dao Yun agreed. Chapter 1129. Looking at the unhappy faces of the 3, Saint King Tailing knew they wouldn't agree if he took 40%. Saint King Tailing shook his head and said, no matter what, I discovered Tianyuan Kingdom. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have such a great opportunity. I don't want 40%, but I want at least 30. If it's any less, I don't need to go to Tianyuan Kingdom. 30%? The 3 Saint Kings looked at each other and nodded. After all, there was still 50% left. If the 3 of them split it, they could get 20%. That was acceptable. Okay. The 3 Saint Kings nodded and agreed. The distribution of the treasures was settled. Let's be nobodies first, Saint King Tailing said. To avoid unnecessary conflict, let's make a heart-blood oath together. Okay. The 5 of them all made a heart-blood oath, promising that they wouldn't attack each other. The chaotic laws poured down and formed 5 contracts that merged into the foreheads of the 5 of them. The so-called heart-blood oath was a creation of the chaotic laws. If someone broke the oath, they would be devoured by their inner demons. If it was light, they would go crazy. If it was heavy, their soul would be destroyed. Ha ha ha, good, good. After making the heart-blood oath, Saint King Tailing laughed loudly. He looked very happy. The 3 Saint Kings smiled as well. After all, they didn't have to worry about anything. As for Yi Xian, his face was also full of smiles. However, a trace of playfulness flashed through his eyes. The mind-blood oath that had just been condensed merged with his body and was directly destroyed by the nirvana force within his body. This contract had no effect on him at all. 20%? What a joke. How could Yi Xian only want 20%? Everything he did was just a cover. Yi Xian's real goal was to take it all. All the treasures of Tianyuan Kingdom were his. Moreover, it wasn't just the treasures of Tianyuan Kingdom. He also wanted to devour the cultivations of the 4 Saint Kings. That was the only way he could maximize his benefits. Yi Xian understood this principle all too well. If he wanted to reach the peak, then he would have to step on countless corpses to move forward. How could a mere 20% of the treasures be in Yi Xian's eyes? Of course, Yi Xian did not underestimate the 4 saint rulers. After all, the 4 of them were cunning people. If they had a way to break the mind-blood oath, they would have the same thoughts as him. The trip to the Tianyuan kingdom this time would be extremely dangerous. However, on the surface, the 5 of them seemed to be extremely amiable, as if they were of one mind to obtain the treasures of the Tianyuan kingdom. In reality, they all had their own plans. It all depended on who was more capable. There's still a year before the Tianyuan kingdom opens. Let's go now, Saint King Tailing said in a deep voice. All right. The 4 of them nodded slowly. Saint King Tailing directly shot into the sky, and the 4 of them followed him as a streak of light. They shot off in the direction of the Tianyuan kingdom. At the same time, the people of the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace were searching everywhere for Yi Xian. Saint King Hun Tian's soul tablet had shattered, which meant that his soul had been destroyed and he had died. A Saint King was not a small matter for the 10,000 Spirit Sub-Palace in the Great Southern Dou region. In order to nurture Saint King Hun Tian, the 10,000 Spirit Sub-Palace had even given him the position of Vice Palace Master. Now that Saint King Hun Tian was dead, the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace naturally would not give up. They had already sent out 3 Saint King elders to search for Yi Xian. They had also mobilized all the orthodoxies in the Great Southern Dou region to find Yi Xian. Unfortunately, Yi Xian seemed to have evaporated into thin air. This made the people of the 10,000 Spirit Sub-Palace return empty-handed. However, the 10,000 Spirit Sub-Palace did not give up on searching for Yi Xian. As long as Yi Xian appeared immediately, the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace would definitely know. On the other side, Great Southern Dou region, Heaven Mending Pavilion. The Heaven Mending Pavilion Master was very irritated recently because he had received an order. This order was personally passed down by the Heaven Mending Sect Master, so he had to treat it seriously. This order was very simple. It was to ensure Yi Xian's safety. If he was in danger, he had to save Yi Xian at all costs. The Heaven Mending Pavilion Master had a headache now. If it was someone else, it would be fine. However, Yi Xian had killed Saint King Hun Tian. Now, the people of the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace were looking for him everywhere. This made him feel extremely troubled. Looks like I have to personally go to the 10,000 Spirit Sub-Palace to solve this problem for Yi Xian. However, the Tyrant Venerable is too domineering. Moreover, he has the Tyrant Heaven battle physique. Even I am not his opponent. If he does not give me face, I'm afraid things will be difficult. The Heaven Mending Pavilion Master frowned. The Tyrant Venerable. A terrifying figure in the creation realm and the master of the Southern Dou 10,000 Spirit Sub-Palace. In the entire Great Southern Dou region, he was definitely an extremely terrifying figure. The chaotic world was divided into several realms. Small Saint Realm, Great Saint Realm, Saint King Realm, Creation Realm, Yin Yang Realm. The Small Saint Realm required one to pass the 9 heavenly tribulations and receive the chaotic Saint Tribulation before one could step into the Great Saint Realm. The Great Saint Realm was a process of accumulating strength. It was also an extremely important realm to lay a solid foundation. This also meant that one had stepped into a new world. This was because only by stepping into the Great Saint Realm could one peak at the seats of the strongest throughout history. Of course, ordinary great saints did not have the qualifications to peak at the seats of the strongest throughout history. Only those with battle physiques and variant battle physiques had the qualifications to peak. After the Great Saint Realm was the Saint King Realm. These 3 realms were Small Saint King, Great Saint King, and 9 Heavens Saint King. Stepping into the Saint King Realm would evolve the Saint King Realm. This was also a unique ability of the Saint King Realm. Every Saint King realm evolved a different Saint King realm. Naturally, there were differences in power. For example, Saint King Hun Tian was just an ordinary small Saint King. When he unleashed the Saint King realm, it gave Yi Xian great pressure. This was the terrifying part of the Saint King realm. Of course, Yi Xian could withstand the Saint King realm with the body of a great saint because he had passed the variant chaotic saint tribulation. His cultivation base could fight across the realm. However, if it was a Saint King realm evolved from a terrifying battle physique, it was hard to say whether Yi Xian could withstand it. The Saint King realm was a process of creating the Saint King realm. It was also a process of increasing one's cultivation base. Only when one stepped into the 9 heaven Saint King realm could one truly control the Saint King realm evolved. When one cultivated to the peak of the 9 heaven Saint King realm, one would welcome the creation tribulation. After passing the creation tribulation, one would be able to step into the first creation realm. The creation tribulation was a terrifying tribulation that surpassed the chaotic saint tribulation. Countless talented people had died in the creation tribulation. The horror contained within it was unimaginable to outsiders. First creation realm, life and death realm. Second creation realm, nirvana realm. Third creation realm, origin returning realm. These 3 realms were also known as the 3 creation realms. Although there were only 3 realms, each realm contained the danger of death. After passing the 3 creation realms, one would enter the yin-yang reverse chaos realm. One would then welcome the chaotic yin-yang divine thunder. Those who passed would live, but those who failed would die. The dangers within could not be described to outsiders. The yin-yang realm. The first realm, yin pole. The second realm, yang birth. These 2 realms were extremely terrifying. Anyone who could step into the yin-yang realm was an extremely terrifying existence. They were fully qualified to step on the path of competing for the strongest throughout the ages. As for above the yin-yang realm, it was the so-called immortal realm. The immortal realm was extremely mysterious. This kind of person truly stood at the top of the chaotic world. There was no need to describe it here. Chapter 1130. Crack. Lightning interweaved and space distorted. Numerous terrifying black cracks interweaved in the boundless desert. The dust and sand that filled the sky swept up waves of sand, causing this world to become extremely turbid. The door to the Tianyuan kingdom is about to open. Sage King Tailing was covered in holy light, blocking the sandstorm outside. Yi Xian and the others were also waiting with rapt attention. Everyone's eyes were filled with excitement. This desert was called the Desert of Death. It was immeasurable. Without the cultivation of a supreme saint, anyone who entered this desert would lose their way. Fortunately, with Sage King Tailing leading the way, they arrived before the Tianyuan kingdom opened. Right now, they were waiting for the entrance to the Tianyuan kingdom to open. It's here. Yi Xian's eyes flickered. As expected, there were terrifying ripples in space. A barely discernible door appeared, as if it would appear at any moment. Everyone, remember, although the Tianyuan kingdom has been destroyed, there are still formations and restrictions inside. Once we enter, we must not be separated, Sage King Tailing said solemnly. Rumble. The door to the Tianyuan kingdom finally appeared. Sage King Tailing called out to everyone and entered first. Yi Xian and the others quickly followed. The 5 of them disappeared from the outside world. The Tianyuan kingdom. Ripples appeared in the air as they spread out. Yi Xian took a step forward, and a vast and boundless scene appeared before his eyes. The sky was wide, and the sun was high in the sky. There were mountains in the distance, and below them was a vast land. Stars filled the sky, and the sun, moon, and stars shone resplendently. This is a real world. Yi Xian muttered in surprise. Brother Yi, you're wrong. This is a world created by an immortal expert. It's just isolated from the chaos. It's a world of its own, said Old Mother Ninecurl. That's right. The Tian Yuan Kingdom was once a chaotic sect. They had never wither experts. It's just a pity that the Tian Yuan Kingdom has been destroyed. The world we live in has lost its spirituality. Otherwise, the worlds created by never-wither experts wouldn't be as lifeless as they are right now, Saint King Yin Hai said in a timely manner. Although Yi Xian was very powerful, he didn't know much about the chaos. He used this time to ask, why was the Tianyuan kingdom destroyed? Sigh. The tailing Saint King sighed and said, it's all because of the battle between the strongest back then. The Tianyuan kingdom was originally a colossus of the last Yuan Hui. In order to nurture the strongest to compete for the 10th Yuan Hui, they were destroyed by the Lord of all spirits in the end. In the battle of the Great Tao, life and death follow. Before the Lord of all spirits achieved the Great Tao, there was a monstrous genius in the Tianyuan kingdom. He had the Tianyuan battle body and defeated all his enemies. Even the Lord of all spirits saw him as a great enemy, Sage King Daoyan said. What a pity. That monstrous genius died at the hands of the Lord of all spirits. Even the Tianyuan kingdom was destroyed by the Lord of all spirits. Old Mother Ninecurl sighed. In the battle of the strongest, bones pave the way. If you don't become the strongest, you'll end up as a skeleton under the feet of others. That monstrous genius once fought against the 9 heaven saint kings at the supreme saint level and didn't lose. He had very few opponents along the way. Unfortunately, his soul was destroyed in the end. The Tianyuan battle body no longer exists in this world, Sage King Yin Hai sighed. Does he have a name? Yi Xian was very curious about someone who could compete with the Lord of all spirits. This made him ask the question in his heart. Gai Tianyuan, a peerless hero, Sage King Tailing said. Gai Tianyuan? Yi Xian murmured, then shook his head. Even though Gai Tianyuan was extremely dazzling, he had only fallen in the end. Perhaps he was buried in this barren world. Alright, let's cut to the chase. Do you see that mountain range in front of us? That's the orthodoxy of the Tianyuan kingdom. This mountain is called Tianyuan Mountain. At the top of the mountain is the Tianyuan Divine Palace. However, if you want to reach the top of Tianyuan Mountain, you'll have to break through the seals. This requires us to work together, Sage King Tailing said. After Sage King Tailing finished speaking, the group shot towards Tianyuan Mountain. Tianyuan Mountain. A mountain path led to the top of the mountain. On both sides of the path was endless fog. It was impossible to see the outline of Tianyuan Mountain. Everyone, there is only one path up the mountain. However, there will be 99,999 restrictions along the way. Some of the restrictions will contain spiritual treasures. They may be weapons, or they may be cultivation methods, or they may even be the legendary heavenly primary elixir. Of course, not every seal contains treasures. The chances of that are not high. It all depends on your luck. However, let's make it clear first. The 5 of us have to tell each other the treasures we find. When the trip to the Tianyuan kingdom is over, we'll divide the treasures according to what we agreed on before, Sage King Tailing said. Hearing Sage King Tailing's words, everyone thought that there was no problem. However, Yi Xian was confused. He asked, what is the white fog on both sides of the path? The chaotic fog. This chaotic fog is extremely dangerous. It contains terrifying power of laws. Some monsters live in it. Even creation realm cultivators will die if they enter it. Remember, do not leave this path and enter the chaotic fog. Otherwise, you will die, Sage King Tailing warned. Sage King Tailing, does that mean you didn't reach the top last time? You only found a Tianyuan pill in a seal. Yi Xian squinted his eyes. Yi Xian wasn't the only one who had this question. The other 3 also looked at the Great Spirit Saint King in confusion. After all, everyone was extremely vigilant in such a dangerous place. Naturally, they wouldn't completely believe the Great Spirit Saint King's words. Sage King Tailing seemed to have expected Yi Xian and the others to ask him this question. His expression didn't change. He nodded slowly and said, "Of course I didn't reach the top. After all, there are 90,000 seals. I can't break them all by myself. But now, with the 5 of us, we can reach the top in tens of millions of years. Then, all the treasures of the Tianyuan kingdom will be ours," Sage King Tailing said. Hee hee. Suddenly, Yi Xian smiled darkly and said, "Since the Tianyuan kingdom was created by an immortal realm cultivator, these 90,000 seals must be extremely dangerous. I'm afraid I won't be able to leave this place alive." Sage King Tailing, "You didn't tell us this place was so dangerous. It's fine if we can break these seals, but if we can't break them and fall into a seal, won't we be in danger of dying?" Mother Juku said coldly. "Everyone, as the saying goes, wealth comes from danger. If it's really so easy to get the treasures of the Tianyuan kingdom, why would I need to gather all of you? Wouldn't it be better for me to enjoy them alone?" Sage King Tailing said nonchalantly. Chapter 1131. Alright, there's only 30 million years until the next Tianyuan gate opens. We have to get the treasures of Tianyuan kingdom in these 30 million years. Now that we're here, are we going to go back? Daoyun Saint King said. That's right. How can we go back empty-handed? Let's go up the mountain, Inhai Saint King agreed. Boom. Dao Cloud Saint King strode forward and destroyed a prohibition spell in front of him. Everyone's eyes lit up. They didn't waste any more time and started to break the prohibition spell in front of them. Rumble. The heavens and earth rumbled and Saint Light exploded. The 5 of them broke one seal after another without any delay. From the foot of the mountain to the peak, there would be a seal appearing every 3 steps. The 5 of them took turns to break the seals and moved forward quickly. 9-colored divine Ganoderma. Suddenly, someone exclaimed. Daoyun Saint King's face was flushed and he was holding a spiritual essence in his hand. It was shining with 9-colored light. Quick, let me have a look. Saint King Inhai instantly appeared in front of Saint King Daoyun and reached out to grab the 9-colored Immortal Ganoderma. However, Saint King Daoyun dodged to the side and grabbed the Ganoderma in his hand. He looked at Saint King Inhai gloomily. "This is the treasure I found." "Inhai, what do you want?" Daoyun Saint King said coldly. "You." Inhai Saint King's face changed and a cold light flashed in his eyes. "Alright, we've agreed that all the treasures will be distributed according to our agreement. This 9-colored divine Ganoderma will be in Daoyun Saint King's hands. We'll distribute the treasures after this trip is over." Tailing Saint King strode forward and dispelled the heavy atmosphere. At this moment, Yi Xian looked on coldly. A look of disdain flashed in his eyes. They had just gotten a treasure and there was already a dispute. It seemed that the trip to Tianyuan Kingdom was getting more and more interesting. It's all up to Brother Tailing. Daoyun Saint King smiled and put the 9-colored divine Ganoderma into his pocket. Inhai Saint King squinted his eyes and didn't say anything. Only a cold light flashed in his eyes. Bang! 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 The mountains shook and the heaven and earth exploded. More than 2,000 seals were broken, allowing the 5 of them to obtain 4 treasures. A chaotic divine weapon, a void yuan pill, a Saint King grade secret art, and a wind and thunder fan. Strangely enough, Yi Xian had only obtained a void energy elixir, while old Mother Juku had obtained a chaos divine weapon. Sage King cultivation technique had been obtained by Sage King, and Daoyun Sage King had obtained the wind and thunder fan. In addition to the 9-colored divine Ganoderma, he had obtained 2 portions. Among the 5 of them, only Saint King Inhai had nothing to show for it, and his expression was becoming more and more gloomy. Along the way, he kept blasting open the restrictions, but to no avail. Just as Yin Hai Saint King was in a bad mood, Tao Cloud Saint King got another heaven and earth spirit item. This made Yin Hai Saint King's eyes turn red. It had to be said that Tao Cloud Saint King was extremely lucky. He already had 3 treasures. Although they had agreed to split the treasures equally, Yin Hai Saint King did not even get a single treasure. He was naturally suspicious. If they did not follow the agreement after the Tianyuan kingdom ended, wouldn't he have wasted all his efforts? Moreover, Yin Hai Saint King also realized something very serious. As they continued to move forward, the restrictions that appeared became more and more powerful. He was already faintly feeling the strain. But now, they had only broken through over 4,000 restrictions, and were still very far from 99,999. Furthermore, the Yin Hai Saint King was extremely certain that it was impossible for them to reach the peak, because the further they went, the more powerful the restrictions were, and it was not something they could break through. Wait! As the 4 of them continued to move forward, Yin Hai Saint King could not help but call out to them. What is it, Yin Hai? Sage King frowned. I suggest we distribute the treasures we obtained now, Yin Hai Saint King said sinisterly. Now? Tao Cloud Saint King's face turned cold. Yin Hai, do you not trust us? Brother Yin Hai, there's no rush to distribute the treasures. How about we wait until we're out of the Tianyuan kingdom? Old Mother Juku frowned. That's right. If we distribute the treasures according to the agreement, it'll take too much time. Let's talk about this later, Sage King said. I don't mind. You guys discuss among yourselves. Yi Xian smiled at Yin Hai Saint King and casually expressed his opinion. Yi Xian could already see that the conflict was starting to grow. It would not take long for it to explode. Yi Xian could see through people's hearts. Naturally, he could also guess Yin Hai Saint King's thoughts. Moreover, it was not just Yin Hai Saint King. Tao Cloud Saint King and Old Mother Juku also had their own thoughts. Now that they had obtained more and more treasures, Tao Cloud Saint King had already obtained 3 treasures. However, according to the agreement, Tao Cloud Saint King could only get less than 20% of the treasures. If Tao Cloud Saint King had only obtained 1 treasure, he would naturally have no problem with the distribution. However, he had obtained 3 treasures. How could he be willing to hand them over to be divided equally? Everyone was greedy. Even Sage Kings were no exception. The conflict had already appeared. It was just a fuse away from exploding. Yi Xian was not too concerned about Tao Cloud Saint King and the other 2. He had been paying attention to that old fox, Tai Ling. Yi Xian felt that Tai Ling was hiding something. Moreover, Tai Ling Saint King did not seem to care about the treasures along the way. A hint of anxiety could be seen between his brows from time to time. Something was wrong. There was definitely something wrong with Tai Ling Saint King. Alright, I hope everyone will remember our agreement from before, Saint King Yin Hai said in a gloomy voice. He moved forward again and broke through another restriction. This person, when he was unlucky, even drinking cold water would get stuck in his teeth. Perhaps Yin Hai Saint King was truly unlucky. Another 4,000 restrictions were broken, and everyone obtained a large amount of treasures, but Yin Hai Saint King still had nothing. At this moment, Saint King Yin Hai's face was extremely gloomy. He moved forward silently without saying a word. However, every time he broke through a restriction, they could feel his gloomy and cold aura. Bang! There was an explosion. This was the 9,999th seal. There was one more seal to reach the 10,000 mark. It was also this seal that was broken. A golden pill floated out. Heaven Primary Pill. When the pill fell into Yi Xian's hands, the 4 great Saint Kings cried out in alarm. Their eyes instantly turned scarlet red, and even their breathing became extremely hurried. Give it to me. Suddenly, the 4 of them shot towards Yi Xian, wanting to snatch the pill away with a chop of their hands. Buzz! Yi Xian moved to the side and avoided the four of them. He then looked at them coldly and said, "What is the meaning of this?" Chapter 1132. The four Saint Kings came to their senses instantly and realized that they had been too impulsive. Saint King Tailing rolled his eyes and hurriedly said with a smile, "Fellow Yi, please don't misunderstand. We were just too excited when we saw the Heaven Primary Elixir. Please keep this elixir carefully." "Yes, that's what I meant." Daoyun Saint King smiled awkwardly, but his eyes were burning with desire. "My friend, the Heaven Essence Pill is a supreme treasure. We didn't make this trip in vain." Old Mother Juku smiled, but the desire in her eyes didn't fade. After all, the Heaven Essence Pill could raise one's cultivation level. How could they not value it? Yi Xian could completely feel the fiery gazes of the four of them. He played with the pill in his hand as his eyes turned strangely. Then, he smiled as he looked at the Yin Hai Saint King and said, "Fellow Taoist Yin Hai, we have already obtained so many treasures. Fellow Taoist's luck is not good, so I'll leave this Heaven Yuan pill with you." This can be considered a good sign for fellow Taoist to get rid of his bad luck. As Yi Xian spoke, he really handed the Heaven Yuan pill over to Saint King Yin Hai. This caused Saint King Yin Hai to be overjoyed. He hurriedly received the Heaven Yuan pill and looked at Yi Xian with an extremely grateful expression. "Fellow Taoist Yi, from now on, you're a friend of my Yin Hai. No matter what you need in the future, my Yin Hai lineage will definitely go through water and tread on fire for you." Yin Hai Sage Monarch patted his chest and promised. "My friend, you're too serious." Yi Xian smiled. What's there to be proud of? Do you think the primary heaven elixir is yours? These treasures have to be divided equally according to the agreement." Daoyun Saint King glanced sideways at Yin Hai Saint King and sneered. "Alright, the next restriction is the 10,000th one. If I'm not wrong, it must contain treasures even more precious than the Heaven Essence Pill." Tailing Saint King interrupted. "Let me." With the Heaven Essence Pill in hand, Yin Hai Saint King's face glowed. He didn't look as gloomy as before. He unleashed his Supreme Saint King cultivation and punched at the restriction. Bang! Something shocking happened. Saint King Yin Hai's all-out attack actually didn't break this restriction. Instead, he staggered back. How is this possible? Saint King Yin Hai stopped in his tracks and stared blankly at the restriction before him. Although he knew that the later restrictions would be stronger, the 10,000th restriction did not even budge after receiving his full-force attack. This simply surprised him to the extreme. Sure enough. Tailing Saint King narrowed his eyes, his voice as soft as a mosquito. Yi Xian had been secretly observing the Great Spirit Saint King. Although the other party's voice was extremely weak, Yi Xian had heard everything. Furthermore, Yi Xian could see a hint of greed in the eyes of the Great Spirit Saint King. Clearly, the other party knew something. Let me try. Daoyun Saint King strode forward and unleashed a great technique at the restriction in front of him. However, just like Yin Hai Saint King, it did not break the restriction. Old Mother Juku frowned and gathered a Saint King grand technique in her hands. However, before she could make a move, the Great Spirit Saint King stopped her. No need to try. This 10,000th restriction cannot be broken by anyone below the creation realm. Even if we attack it for millions of years, we still won't be able to break it, the Great Spirit Saint King said in a low voice. Taoist Tailing, it seems like you know a lot about the Tianyuan kingdom. Yi Xian sneered. Yi Daoyu, don't misunderstand. I also learned about this from an ancient book. If we want to break this restriction, we need to work together to break it, the Great Spirit Saint King said. Then what are we waiting for? Let's hurry up and do it, the Great Spirit Saint King urged. Everyone, let's do it. The Great Spirit Saint King suddenly attacked, directly at the restriction in front of them. At the same time, the three Saint Kings also unleashed their most powerful techniques and also attacked the restriction. Only Yi Xian's eyes turned and only threw a punch. He did not use his full strength. Something was wrong. Yi Xian had always suspected that there was something wrong with the Great Spirit Saint King. There was something wrong with this person's body. He could not use his cultivation as a Nine-Heaven Saint King, but now he did not care about himself and released such a terrifying power. Rumble. Suddenly, when the 5 people's attacks landed on the 10,000th restriction, something extremely terrifying happened. Retreat. Old Mother Juku screamed in horror because the 10,000th restriction did not break. Instead, it exploded with a terrifying light and swallowed the 5 people. Oh no, the restriction has been activated. The Great Spirit Saint King trembled and shouted, his whole body retreating quickly. Yi Xian's face was gloomy. He had already felt that something was wrong and had retreated as soon as possible. But what made Yi Xian depressed was that the light from the restriction had already covered them. There was no way they could escape this place. Woo woo woo. A strange wind blew and a sea of fog covered the sky. Yi Xian only felt that the world was spinning. When he opened his eyes again, he had already appeared in the fog. Where is this? Where is this? Suddenly, the sharp voice of the Great Spirit Saint King came from Yi Xian's side, accompanied by the noisy voices of the Great Spirit Saint King and the others. Everyone, don't move. We have already left the mountain path and fell into the sea of fog. It was so dark that one could only hear the voice of the Great Spirit Saint King. A few blurry figures appeared in front of Yi Xian, which also let Yi Xian know that the Great Spirit Saint King was beside him. My cultivation. Why can't I use my cultivation? Suddenly, Old Mother Juku screamed, her voice containing extreme panic. Spiritual Qi. Why is there no spiritual Qi in this sea of fog? The Great Spirit Saint King trembled and shouted. Yi Xian's brows tightly knitted together as he listened to their panicked voices. This was because he was unable to mobilize his cultivation, and he could even feel that this sea of primal chaos seemed to be imprisoning his cultivation. He was unable to mobilize it at all. Don't make a sound. This sea of fog is the work of the Tianyuan kingdom. It is a terrifying thing that was transplanted from the starry sky. There are extremely terrifying monsters living in it. If these monsters find us, we will definitely die. The Great Spirit Saint King warned in a low voice. Silence, silence, dead silence. No one made a sound. An extremely oppressive atmosphere grew, and it was filled with speechless terror. Where is everyone? Let's not separate. Old Mother Juku lowered her voice and broke the silence. I'm here. The Great Spirit Saint King was the closest to Old Mother Juku, and the two quickly gathered together. Are you Yi Daoyu? The Great Spirit Saint King saw Yi Xian's blurry silhouette and asked in a low voice. That's me. Yi Xian answered in a low voice. However, as he looked around, a trace of malice flashed in his eyes. Although he could not use his cultivation, Yi Xian's nirvana power and spacetime power were not affected at all. Furthermore, Yi Xian's physical body was extremely terrifying, and his eyes could roughly see his surroundings. Chapter 1133. This was a vast and boundless mountain range, and it was completely covered by the chaotic fog sea. At this moment, he was in a forest, and there were plants all around him. Yi Daoyu. Saint King Yinhai groped his way forward and finally arrived beside Yi Xian. This chaotic fog sea is extremely strange. We can't wander around. We have to return to the mountain path, Yi Xian said in a deep voice. Soon, the 5 of them regrouped. Although they were surrounded by the fog sea, they could still vaguely see each other's faces. This made them slightly relieved. If we knew that the Tianyuan kingdom was so dangerous, we would have retreated long ago, Saint King Yinhai said coldly. Cut the crap. We're all in the chaotic fog sea now. What's the point of saying all this? Saint King Daoyun scolded coldly. Daoyun, you have the most treasures. Of course you don't care. Saint King Inhai was already unhappy with Daoyun, so he scolded him angrily. Inhai, don't be so shameless. Saint King Daoyun was already filled with anger, so he scolded Saint King Inhai. Daoyun, do you want to die? Saint King Inhai glared at him. Alright, look at the time. Why are you two still arguing? Old Mother Juku frowned and scolded. Taoist Juku is right. This is not the time for us to fight. Finding a way out is the most important thing, Saint King Tailing said in a deep voice. That's easy for you to say. But we can't use our cultivation at all. We're no different from mortals. How can we find a way out? Saint King Inhai said angrily. Don't worry. I'm a 9 Heavens Saint King. Although I can't use my cultivation, I can still see the path clearly. As long as you follow me, we'll definitely be able to walk out of this chaotic fog sea, Saint King Tailing said. As Saint King Tailing's words fell, the 3 Saint Kings were reinvigorated. Their eyes lit up again. Alright. If we can escape from this disaster, we won't forget Taoist Tailing's kindness. Saint King Daoyun quickly patted his chest and promised. Saint King Inhai and Old Mother Juku also quickly agreed. At this moment, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. Even though there was mist around them, he could still see Tailing Holy King's expression. He was smiling evilly. Clearly, things were not as simple as they seemed. Go! The Great Spirit Saint King said in a low voice as he walked out of the forest. The 3 Saint Kings hurriedly followed behind him, and Yi Xian also stood up to accompany him. Time passed very quickly. A full year had passed, but the 5 of them still hadn't walked out of the forest. They hadn't even seen the shadow of the mountain path. It was also during this year that their cultivation bases gradually weakened. After all, they were unable to obtain the support of spiritual qi in this sea of chaos. Their cultivation bases were being rapidly depleted. Even though this sort of loss wasn't obvious, along with the passage of time, they would sooner or later perish within this chaotic sea of mist. Every time their cultivation base was depleted, it would be depleted. Moreover, they couldn't use their cultivation base to open their Qiankuan bags and take out the spirit stones inside to absorb the spiritual energy. Most likely, in less than 10,000 years, all 5 of them would die. 10 years passed by in a flash. The 5 of them seemed to be walking in circles in this forest. They couldn't walk out of this forest at all. We're not going. Saint King Inhai plopped down on the ground. His eyes were filled with despair. Chaotic sea of chaos, a place of great danger. We've been walking in circles. We can't walk out of this place at all. Old Mother Juku said in a trembling voice. What should we do? What should we do now? Daoyun Saint King roared in a trembling voice. In this formless atmosphere of fear, he was extremely irritable. Shut up. Do you want to lure out the monsters in the sea of chaos? Tailing Holy King scolded coldly. Roar. Suddenly, the forest shook. A fishy wind whistled, accompanied by the roar of a beast. The forest shook violently. A strange whirlwind suddenly blew past, giving people goosebumps. Not good. Tailing Holy King roared in shock. Roar. The beast's roar shook the void. A black light suddenly appeared in front of the 5 of them, accompanied by an extremely terrifying howl. Ah, save me! Daoyun Saint King screamed in agony. He was brought into the sea of chaos by the black light and disappeared in front of the 5 of them. No! Daoyun Saint King screamed in agony. A terrifying chewing sound came from the depths of the sea of chaos. It was as if a terrifying monster was tearing Daoyun Saint King apart and swallowing him into its stomach. Let's go! Tailing Holy King roared in shock. He was the first to escape. Unfortunately, before they could escape, the black light attacked again. This time, its target was Saint King Yin Hai. Ah! Yi Daoyu, save me! Puchi! At this critical moment, one of Saint King Yin Hai's arms was bitten off by the mysterious monster. Only Yi Xian was by his side. He could only cry for help from Yi Xian. Bang! Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. A wisp of space-time power flashed past his eyes. His 5 fingers suddenly slapped toward the black shadow. Roar! A painful cry came from the monster's mouth. Then, it suddenly escaped into the sea of chaos. Saint King Yin Hai barely kept his life. However, one of his arms was bitten off by the monster. A large amount of blood was flowing out of his arm. You can use your cultivation. The great spirit Saint King turned his head to look at Yi Xian in shock. His originally fleeing footsteps had already stopped, and his gaze towards Yi Xian was filled with extreme shock. Although I can't use my cultivation, don't forget that my physical strength is not affected, Yi Xian said in a low voice. Thank you for saving my life. Saint King Yin Hai's face was pale, but he still thanked Yi Xian. If Yi Xian had not pushed the monster back, he would have died in the monster's mouth like Daoyun Saint King. The danger is not over yet. I can feel that the monster has not left yet. It is watching us from the dark. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and looked into the depths of the sea of chaos. He could feel a pair of fierce eyes staring at him. In fact, although the sea of chaos was scary, it was nothing to Yi Xian. As long as he used the power of nirvanic destruction to open a path, he could return to the mountain path. However, Yi Xian did not do so. He suspected that Tailing Holy King was playing tricks. He also wanted to see what Tailing Holy King wanted to do. Roar! Suddenly, the beast's roar came again. A black light attacked the 4 of them again. They could vaguely see that it was a creature with a leopard's head and a tiger's body that was covered by the black light. Be careful! Saint King Yin Hai trembled and roared. However, this time, the monster did not attack him and Yi Xian. Instead, it instantly appeared in front of Old Mother Juku. No! Old Mother Juku screamed. However, she was instantly brought into the depths of the sea of chaos by the monster. An extremely shrill scream came from the depths of the sea of chaos. Let's go, Yi Daoyu. Let's go. Saint King Yin Hai followed Yi Xian closely and urged Yi Xian with a trembling voice. Let's leave this place quickly. The great spirit Saint King also let out a low roar, and then strode forward to escape. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and followed Saint King Tailing. Saint King Yin Hai followed closely behind Yi Xian. The 3 of them quickly left this place. Chi! 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 Yi Xian and the other 2 had just walked 3,000 feet when something terrifying happened again. The weeds on the ground exploded with a terrifying light, turning into billions of sharp qi that attacked Yi Xian. Clang! 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 Yi Xian's body was flawless. No matter how the sharp qi approached him, it only made the sound of metal clashing. It did not cause any damage to him. Meanwhile, Saint King Yin Hai hid behind Yi Xian. He was completely stunned on the spot. However, it was also at this moment that the great spirit Saint King strangely disappeared. This caused Yi Xian's expression to darken as he continuously looked around at his surroundings. A strange smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Yi Daoyu, what should we do now? Saint King Yin Hai trembled as he spoke. Saint King Tailing had also disappeared. Clearly, he had been captured by the monster. Let's go back. Yi Xian pondered for a moment, then turned around and walked back. This made Saint King Yin Hai pale with fright. However, he hesitated for a moment and quickly followed Yi Xian. Chapter 1134. The Chaos Fog Sea was filled with extremely terrifying fog. Even a weed under one's feet could take one's life. Yi Xian and Saint King Yin Hai returned to their original spot. The surrounding trees rustled, and the fog became thicker. Even Yi Xian's vision was affected. Yi Daoyu, as long as you can bring me out of here, you will be a friend of the Yin Hai lineage. We will never forget your kindness, Saint King Yin Hai said weakly as he clutched his severed arm. His face was filled with fear. Obviously, in this dangerous primal chaos fog sea, Yi Xian had become the Yin Hai Saint King's savior. How could this not make the Yin Hai Saint King lower his attitude towards Yi Xian? Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not answer. Instead, he observed the surroundings and carefully sensed the monster's aura. Roar! A gust of wind blew, and a black shadow appeared. The monster in the fog appeared again and shot straight at Saint King Yin Hai. Bang! Yi Xian threw a punch and sent the monster flying. However, this wasn't the end. Yi Xian charged forward, wanting to capture the monster in his hands. However, the sea of primal chaos suddenly surged, and before Yi Xian could arrive in front of the monster strangely disappeared once again. Brother Yi, are you alright? Saint King Yin Hai broke out in cold sweat. He even changed the way he addressed Yi Xian. Just now, he was calling him, fellow Taoist, but now, he was using honorifics. Saint King Yin Hai was almost scared to death. Just now, he almost thought that he was going to be captured by this monster. If Yi Xian hadn't repelled the monster in time, he probably would have died at the hands of this monster. Stay close to me. Don't take a step away. Yi Xian strode into the depths of the fog sea. Saint King Yin Hai nodded. Even if Yi Xian did not remind him, he would not leave. As a Saint King, he actually needed the protection of a supreme saint. Saint King Yin Hai's feelings were extremely complicated. However, he could only sigh helplessly because he could not use his cultivation. Yi Daoyu? Is that Yi Daoyu? Suddenly, just as Yi Xian and Saint King Yin Hai walked 10 miles, a blurry figure appeared in the fog ahead. Who else could it be but Saint King Tailing? Tailing, you're still alive. Saint King Yin Hai was shocked. He thought that Saint King Tailing had been killed by the monster. The Great Spirit Saint King hurriedly walked towards the two of them. His hair was disheveled and there were many wounds on his body. Large amounts of blood had already soaked his clothes. Don't mention it. Luckily, I'm a 9 Heavens Saint King. I used my Saint King world to save my life, Saint King Tailing said with lingering fear. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. He kept looking at Saint King Tailing, and a strange look flashed across his eyes. Taoist Tailing, you have a high cultivation. Do you have a way to get out? Yi Xian asked. That's right. You're the one who brought us into the Tianyuan kingdom, so you must know this place better than us. Fellow Great Spirit, you should think of something, Holy Monarch Yin Hai said anxiously as he looked around at the terrifying environment. What can I do? Am I not trapped here too? Saint King Tailing shook his head helplessly. Is that so? Suddenly, Yi Xian smiled eerily and threw a punch at Saint King Tailing. Saint King Tailing's expression changed. Saint King Tailing also threw a punch at Yi Xian. There was an explosion in the void, and the fog rolled. When the two fists collided, both of them retreated, while Saint King Yin Hai was completely stunned on the spot. Fellow Taoist Yi, what are you doing? Tailing Sage King asked with a murderous look. Brother Yi, you. Saint King Yin Hai woke up instantly. He looked at Yi Xian in shock. He didn't know why Yi Xian attacked Saint King Tailing. Yin Hai, take a good look. Why can he use his cultivation? Yi Xian whispered. Cultivation? Saint King Yin Hai was stunned. After 3 breaths, his expression changed. He looked at Saint King Tailing. You can use your cultivation. Saint King Yin Hai roared. He just didn't realize it before. After Yi Xian reminded him, he suddenly remembered that they couldn't use their cultivation in the Chaos Sea. Why was Saint King Tailing not affected at all? Silence, speechless silence. The Great Spirit Saint King's eyebrows drooped. After a full 10 breaths of time, he raised his head, but there was an extremely helpless look on his face. Ah, you found out. Saint King Tailing said bitterly. Big Brother Tailing, you and I have been friends for many years. What are you hiding? Are you trying to harm me? Saint King Yin Hai said angrily. Brother Yin Hai, don't blame me. I was forced by this monster. Saint King Tailing said, ashamed. What did you hide from us? Saint King Yin Hai's eyelids twitched. Looks like fellow Taoist Great Spirit has some difficulties. Yi Xian's eyes turned as he spoke. Actually, what I told you about Tianyuan Kingdom is half true and half false. Back then, Saint King Tailing seemed to be lost in his memories. He told Yi Xian and Saint King the truth. It turned out that when Saint King Tailing entered Tianyuan Kingdom, he got a heaven essence pill. It was true that there were many treasures in Tianyuan Kingdom. The only difference was that he had not obtained the heavenly yuan pill from some restriction. Instead, it had been given to him by this monster. As soon as he had entered the kingdom of heaven, he had been restrained by this monster. A terrifying blood contract had been planted in his saint's soul. This monster didn't kill him. Instead, it let him leave Tianyuan Kingdom and let him attract Saint King's 30 million years later to feed on him. His saint's soul had been planted with a blood contract, and his body was controlled by this monster. Saint King Tailing had no other choice. He had tried to find a way to break it, but his saint's soul had been damaged, and he himself had serious problems. It wasn't because of cultivation that he had gone mad. Seeing that the 30 million year time limit was up, Saint King Tailing could only lure Yi Xian and the others into Tianyuan Kingdom. That was why this happened. Tailing, I called you my brother for so many years. You want to kill us? After hearing Saint King Tailing's story, Saint King Yin Hai was furious. He looked at Saint King Tailing with hatred. Brother Yin Hai, I was forced to do this, Saint King Tailing said bitterly. Then I'm curious. Since you're controlled by this monster, why are you telling us the truth now? You should be helping this monster kill us, right? Yi Xian said lightly. Because I've had enough. I don't want to be controlled by this monster anymore. I don't want to become a walking corpse. This monster won't let me go after killing you. That's why I told you the truth. I want to work with you to kill this monster. Saint King Tailing's eyes were red. Chapter 1135. Now that we're trapped here and can't use our cultivation, how can we kill this monster? Saint King Yin Hai was extremely dispirited. Even if he knew the truth, there was nothing he could do. Actually, I didn't waste the past 30 million years. I've read countless books to find out the origin of this monster. The Great Spirit Saint King's spirit was roused as he continued, this monster is called the Chaos Fog Beast. It is a terrifying creature that lives in the chaos starry sky. They can create the chaos fog to isolate the spirit chi of the outside world and achieve the effect of sealing the cultivation of others. And I've found a fog avoidance pearl. That's why I'm not affected by the chaos fog sea and can use my cultivation. However, this monster doesn't have a real body. Its form can change into thousands of forms. If we want to kill it, we need to find the source of this monster, Saint King Tailing said quickly. Source? Yi Xian frowned. Yes, the source pearl. If the Chaos Fog Beast wants to create the Chaos Fog Sea, it must release the source pearl in its body. As long as we find its source pearl and destroy it, the Chaos Fog Sea will naturally disappear and this monster will die, Saint King Tailing said excitedly. But we're already in the Chaos Fog Sea. Where can we find its source pearl? Saint King Yin Hai frowned. In the depths of the Chaos Fog Sea, which is the nest of this monster. Its source pearl is there. It sent me out to lure you two there. This monster has already set up a killing formation to trap and kill you too. We'll beat it at its own game. Saint King Yin Hai and I will block this monster while Yi Dao Yu destroys its source pearl. This way, we can escape and I won't be controlled by this monster anymore, Saint King Tailing said quickly. Okay. Saint King Yin Hai's eyes lit up. Yi Xian frowned as he continuously scrutinized the Great Spirit Saint King. It was obvious that he didn't really believe the Great Spirit Saint King. As for the Great Spirit Saint King, he looked at Yi Xian with a sincere expression, showing that he definitely didn't have any expression on his face. Since that's the case, let's make a good plan. Yi Xian pondered for 3 breaths before nodding. Very quickly, the 3 of them started to make plans. After the plan was finalized, the 3 of them went into the depths of the Fog Sea under the guidance of Great Spirit Holy King. It didn't take long. 3 days passed. Yi Xian and the other 2 had already reached the depths of the Fog Sea, and the surrounding fog was gradually dispersing. A blood pool appeared in front of them, and it was constantly bubbling. Old Mother Juku and Daoyun Saint King were covered in blood, and they were weakly wailing in the blood pool. They're not dead yet. Saint King Yin Hai muttered in surprise. Shoo, the monster has sensed us, Sage King Tailing hurriedly reminded. Roar. A pitch-black monster with the head of a leopard and the body of a tiger soared into the sky from the pool of blood. An extremely terrifying mist howled through the air as it interweaved into a 30,000-meter large formation that descended towards Yi Xian and the other 2. The origin pearl is at the center of the blood pool. Yi Dao Yu, hurry up and destroy it. Yin Hai and I will stop this monster, Saint King Tailing roared and charged at the Chaos Fog Beast. Lao Tzu, let's do it. Although Saint King Yin Hai's cultivation was sealed, he was still a Saint King. Although his physical body wasn't as strong as Yi Xian's, he could still fight. Tailing, how dare you betray me? The Chaos Fog Beast spoke in human language and charged at Saint King Tailing. Bang! Saint King Tailing took out a Chaos Spirit Sword and slashed at the Chaos Fog Beast. Saint King Yin Hai didn't want to fall behind, and he also punched at the Chaos Fog Beast. Yi Dao Yu, what are you waiting for? Hurry up! Saint King Tailing shouted anxiously. He was already fighting with the Chaos Fog Beast, but the Chaos Fog Beast was extremely terrifying. Just one hit was enough to make him spit out blood. He wasn't the Chaos Fog Beast's opponent at all. At this moment, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. He felt that something was wrong, but the arrow was already on the bow. He stepped into the center of the blood pool. A blood-colored pearl was floating above the blood pool. Hurry up, destroy it. Saint King Tailing retreated as he fought. He kept looking back at Yi Xian. His face was full of anxiety, and his eyes were red at this moment. Yi Dao Yu, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and destroy his origin pearl. Saint King Yin Hai also shouted anxiously. He used all his strength to attack the Chaos Fog Beast, but he couldn't do any damage to the Chaos Fog Beast. The Yin Hai Saint King, who was unable to use his cultivation, was simply too weak. The Yin Hai Saint King and the Great Spirit Saint King retreated step by step, and the Primal Chaos Mist Beast had already sensed that something was wrong. Its fierce gaze fell onto Yi Xian, and from the looks of it, it was about to charge towards him. At this moment, Yi Xian stood above the blood pool. His 5 fingers suddenly reached for the blood-colored pearl, and he directly took it in his hand. This made Saint King Tailing extremely happy. Hurry up, destroy it, destroy it. Saint King Tailing shouted anxiously. If I destroy it, won't you run away? Suddenly, Yi Xian's lips curled into a strange smile. He didn't destroy the blood-colored pearl. Instead, he looked at Saint King Tailing with a mocking expression. Saint King Tailing's expression changed drastically. His entire body froze on the spot. The Chaos Fog Beast that was madly attacking him also suddenly stopped. Just as I thought, Yi Xian said with a cold smile. What's going on? Saint King Yin Hai also sensed that something was wrong because the chaos fog beast in front of him seemed to have turned into a puppet without any intelligence. Its extremely terrifying aura also disappeared without a trace. Silence, silence, an eerie silence. Saint King Tailing's originally ecstatic expression disappeared. It turned into an extremely gloomy expression as he stared at Yi Xian with a sinister expression. When did you find out? Saint King Tailing whispered gloomily. When we were in the holy land of Taichu. Yi Xian played with the blood-colored pearl in his hand and looked at Saint King Tailing contemptuously. I thought my plan was flawless. How could you see through my plan? Saint King Tailing growled as his eyes turned blood-red. Should I call you Saint King Tailing or Gai Tianyuan? Yi Xian said calmly. Boom. As if the chaos thunder exploded, as if the vast ocean waves were crashing down, Saint King Tailing froze on the spot. His aura froze. What are you talking about? After a full 10 breaths of time, the great spirit Saint King tried his best to calm his panic as he angrily reprimanded Yi Xian. TSK, TSK, TSK. Yi Xian played with the blood-colored bead in his hand as he curled his lips in disdain and said, I never thought that the heaven-shaking monster Gai Tianyuan of the past, a peerless figure who could contend with the Lord of all spirits, would actually not dare to admit his identity today. This is truly a huge joke. Chapter 1136. Holy King Tailing looked gloomy. He looked at Yi Xian fiercely. If you looked closely, you would see that he was panicking. It was as if someone had seen through his biggest secret. Hiss. Yi Xian secretly sucked in a breath of cold air in his heart. However, he still pretended to be extremely calm on the surface, but in reality, his heart was already in turmoil. The Great Spirit Saint King didn't know that Yi Xian was only tricking him. Yi Xian only had a little guess, but he didn't expect him to be right. At this moment, the Great Spirit Saint King's expression was extremely gloomy and shocked. This was enough to prove that Yi Xian was right. No, it was not a guess. Yi Xian did suspect that he was Gai Tianyuan. What a guy! He really was Gai Tianyuan. Yi Xian displayed an extremely calm expression, but he was roaring in his heart. Yi Xian guessing that Holy King Tailing was Gai Tianyuan was not baseless. Before they entered Tianyuan Kingdom, Yi Xian had asked them how Tianyuan Kingdom had been destroyed. Their answers were the same. Tianyuan Kingdom had been destroyed by the King of all Spirits, and Gai Tianyuan had died at the hands of the King of all Spirits. Who was the King of all Spirits? He was the most powerful person in the 10th era. To become the most powerful person in history, he must have left behind countless corpses. The King of all Spirits was not a soft-hearted person. Since he had destroyed the Tianyuan Kingdom, the Lord of all Spirits would not leave behind any living beings. However, there was still a primal chaos mist beast alive in the Tianyuan Kingdom, and it had even enslaved the Great Spirit Saint King. In Yi Xian's opinion, this didn't make sense, and was even more suspicious. Of course, this was not a big point of suspicion. If it had been someone else, they might not have noticed it. However, Yi Xian was very sensitive, and he noticed that something was wrong. However, this did not prove that the Great Spirit Holy King was Gai Tianyuan. What really made Yi Xian suspicious was the blood-red bead in his hand. After all, Yi Xian had cultivated the power of nirvanic extermination and the power of spacetime. These two powers were one of the 12 supreme powers, and they were extremely sensitive to other supreme powers. Great Spirit Holy King told Yi Xian that this bead was the original bead of a chaos mist beast. But when Yi Xian held the bead in his hand, the two types of supreme powers inside his body surged crazily, seeming to reject the bead in Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian could also sense that this blood-red bead contained an extremely terrifying power. This power was not inferior to his two supreme powers at all. Therefore, Yi Xian dared to conclude that this blood-red bead was not the original bead of a chaos mist beast. It was a treasure left behind by the Lord of all spirits. It contained the power of all spirits, and it should be a treasure used to seal something. Of course, these 2 points could not prove the identity of the Great Spirit Holy King. Yi Xian guessed that the Great Spirit Holy King was Gai Tianyuan because of his deduction. Back when the Tianyuan kingdom was destroyed, everyone died. If there was a living being that had survived, it would have to be Gai Tianyuan. With these 2 points, and Yi Xian's own deduction, he boldly came to the conclusion that the Great Spirit Holy King was Gai Tianyuan. Someone who could fight against the Lord of all spirits. This kind of person could very likely escape with his life. Of course, Yi Xian was only guessing. He did not expect that his trick would make the Great Spirit Holy King panic. Yi Xian was very sure that the Great Spirit Holy King was Gai Tianyuan. But why did Gai Tianyuan become the Great Spirit Holy King? Yi Xian did not know the process. Young man, you are very smart. So smart that it surprises me. But I do not understand how you knew that I was Gai Tianyuan. The Great Spirit Holy King, no, he should be called Gai Tianyuan. Gai Tianyuan gradually calmed down. He looked at Yi Xian calmly, but there was a flash of curiosity in his eyes. Previously, I was only guessing. But now that you've confessed without being pressed, I've finally confirmed your identity. Yi Xian smiled and continued, actually, if you did not admit your identity, I would not have believed that you were Gai Tianyuan. Because the Lord of all spirits would not have let you live. But now your identity is clear. You are really Gai Tianyuan. Yinhai Holy King trembled. He came to Yi Xian's side and looked at Gai Tianyuan with fear in his eyes. Gai Tianyuan was an extremely terrifying person. A person who could compete with the Lord of all spirits. How could Yinhai Holy King not be terrified when such a legendary person appeared? I like smart people. You are indeed very smart. But don't you know that the smarter you are, the faster you die? Rumble. Gai Tianyuan said in a gloomy voice. The stiff chaos fog beast turned into a wisp of black smoke and merged into his forehead. An extremely terrifying power burst out. The holy light of creation surrounded his body. He looked at Yi Xian with eyes full of murderous intent. Creation realm, he is in the creation realm. This chaos fog beast was evolved from a wisp of his soul. Yinhai Holy King screamed in horror and stepped back. Facing a terrifying existence in the creation realm, he and Yi Xian could not fight back. You want to kill me? Yi Xian was not afraid. He played with the blood-red bead in his hand. His voice was extremely calm. Only the dead can keep secrets. My identity cannot be known to the outside world. Gai Tianyuan said coldly. But if I die, this bead will not be crushed. You will be trapped here forever. Yi Xian sneered. Silly boy, I just said that you are very smart. Why are you so muddle-headed now? When you took this bead from the myriad spirit blood pool, the myriad spirit heaven sealing formation was already damaged. As long as I seize your body, I can also crush the myriad spirit blood bead and leave this place. Gai Tianyuan sneered. Oh. You are so sure that you can kill me? Yi Xian said with narrowed eyes. Ha ha ha. Gai Tianyuan laughed wildly as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. Then, he stopped laughing and looked at Yi Xian. Although I am only a wisp of my soul and am no longer at the peak of my cultivation, killing a junior like you is as easy as flipping my palm. Want to kill me? I'm afraid it is still too early for you. Rumble. The space-time changed and the world distorted. Yi Xian took a step forward and the space-time around him broke open. He disappeared from Gai Tianyuan's sight in an instant. The power of space-time. The sneer on Gai Tianyuan's face suddenly froze. He roared in horror, his entire being shocked to the extreme. The power of space-time? How can he have the power of space-time? Gai Tianyuan felt like his chest was about to explode. He was in a completely berserk state. Chapter 1137. If there was any power in the chaotic world, it would undoubtedly be the 12 strongest powers of the chaotic world, and the power of time and space ranked in the top 5. The Space-Time Temple. You're from the Space-Time Temple. Gai Tianyuan roared. Impossible, absolutely impossible. Even in the Space-Time Temple, very few people can cultivate the power of time and space. Anyone who can cultivate the power of time and space is a peerless figure. You're just a great saint, how can you cultivate the power of time and space? Gai Tianyuan's eyes were as red as blood as he roared crazily. Outside, Yi Xian had reappeared on the mountain path. In front of him was the 10,000th restriction formation, but at this moment, the restriction formation was shining brightly, reflecting Gai Tianyuan's crazed roar. Obviously, the power of time and space could break through all barriers, allowing Yi Xian to escape easily. Time and space could even travel through the past and the future, let alone a mere restriction formation. Of course, this was because Yi Xian had the power of time and space, but Gai Tianyuan was miserable. He could only roar crazily while trapped in the restriction formation. One might ask, since Gai Tianyuan could transform into Tailing Saint King and walk out of the outside world, why didn't he directly occupy Yi Xian's body? The reason was simple. Gai Tianyuan's remnant soul was suppressed in the restriction formation and could not leave at all, while Tailing Saint King was only controlled by a wisp of his spiritual will, and did not have much cultivation. It was the same reason why he did not dare to attack Yi Xian in the outside world, because only in the restriction formation could he rely on his remnant soul to burst out the cultivation of the creation realm. Yi Daoyu, help, help. Although Yi Xian escaped from the restriction formation, Yinhai Saint King was still inside, and 9 Wei's old mother and Daoyun Saint King were trapped in the 10,000 spirits blood pool, screaming in pain. Junior, let me out at once, or I'll kill the 3 of them. Gai Tianyuan roared crazily, wanting to use the lives of the 3 to threaten Yi Xian. You're really a pig. Do you think I care about their lives? Yi Xian smiled contemptuously, looking at Gai Tianyuan through the restriction light screen as if he was an idiot. Damn it! Gai Tianyuan roared loudly, and his eyes were bloodshot. He wanted to tear Yi Xian apart, but the 10,000 spirits blood pearl was in Yi Xian's hands. If he wanted to escape, he had to get Yi Xian's help. Buzz! Gai Tianyuan stepped forward, but a sliver of his soul was blocked by the restriction. Only Tailing Saint King's body walked out of the restriction. Junior, as long as you release my remnant soul, I'll give you all the treasures of the Tianyuan kingdom, Gai Tianyuan said coldly. Was be Yi Xian. Was Saint, naturally, posed any threat was no threat, was be, and king. Was. Ha! Yi Xian smiled. However, his smile was extremely disdainful as he said, do you really think I'm an idiot? If you release your remnant soul, I'm afraid you'll kill me the moment you come out. No, absolutely not. As long as you let me out, I'll take you in as my last disciple. I'll even teach you the Tianyuan battle art. From today onwards you'll be my disciple. Gai Tianyuan lowered his stance to the extreme, not daring to reveal any killing intent. Unfortunately, Yi Xian chose to ignore Gai Tianyuan's plea. Was this a joke? Would Yi Xian let Gai Tianyuan's soul out? Unless he was tired of living. Bang! Suddenly, Yi Xian sneered and slapped at Gai Tianyuan. Gai Tianyuan was blown away in an instant, and blood spurted out of his mouth. Young man, you dare to humiliate me? Without a remnant soul, Gai Tianyuan only had a strand of his spiritual will on the Great Spirit Saint King's body. He wasn't a match for Yi Xian at all. This palm strike caused the Great Spirit Saint King's body to crack, causing Gai Tianyuan's chest to almost explode from anger. Have you heard of the saying, a fallen phoenix is no better than a chicken? No matter how glorious you were, you're just a lowly ant now. So what if I humiliate you? Yi Xian sneered. I'll break Saint Tailing's body, and you'll be trapped in this cage forever. Yi Xian laughed sinisterly as he struck a space-time technique towards Gai Tianyuan. The terrifying space-time strangling power instantly turned the great spirit Saint King's body into ashes, causing the remnant soul within the restriction to let out a miserable cry of pain. Young man, I, Gai Tianyuan, will not rest until you're dead. Within the restriction, Gai Tianyuan's remnant soul roared furiously. Strands of terrifying black mist rose around him. Even though he didn't have a physical body at the moment, just the power that erupted from his remnant soul was enough to make Saint King Yin Hai tremble. He was deeply afraid that Gai Tianyuan would seize his physical body. Fortunately, Gai Tianyuan did not do that. He only looked at Yi Xian angrily. The black mist around him rolled violently, making the entire cage rumble. Just stay in this cage. Once I obtain the treasures of the Tianyuan kingdom, I will seal the entrance to the Tianyuan kingdom. Even if you can seize the bodies of Yin Hai and the others, you won't be able to leave the Tianyuan kingdom. Yi Xian sneered and was about to cross the 10,000th restriction to search for the treasures of the Tianyuan kingdom. To ordinary people, the cage was indeed terrifying, but Yi Xian had space-time power. He did not need to break the cage by force. He could still get the treasure in the cage. At this moment, seeing Yi Xian about to leave and hearing Yi Xian's vicious words, Gai Tianyuan shivered all over. If Yi Xian really sealed the entrance to the Tianyuan kingdom, he would really be trapped in the cage until his death. Wait! Gai Tianyuan roared, but Yi Xian chose to ignore him. He was already about to leave. Chaos Star Master. I can make you a Chaos Star Master. Gai Tianyuan seemed to have made a decision. He roared at Yi Xian again. He was extremely anxious. If Yi Xian left, he really would have no hope. No matter what price he had to pay, he had to get Yi Xian to help him escape. Oh! Chaos Star Master. Yi Xian's footsteps paused as he curiously turned his head to look at Gai Tianyuan, who was within the restriction. This unfamiliar word aroused his curiosity. Seeing Yi Xian stop, Gai Tianyuan hurriedly said, "Do you know why the Lord of all Spirits wants to kill me? Do you know why he personally came to the Tianyuan kingdom to destroy my orthodoxy?" Why? Yi Xian was puzzled. Chaos Star Master. It's because he wants to become a Chaos Star Master. That's why he personally came to the Tianyuan kingdom. He wants me to give him the legacy of a Chaos Star Master. Gai Tianyuan directly revealed a shocking secret. Are you telling the truth? Yi Xian's face changed drastically. Although he had no idea what a Chaos Star Master was, how could a legacy that the Lord of all Spirits wanted be simple? Chapter 1138. Seeing that Yi Xian had taken the bait, Gai Tianyuan finally heaved a sigh of relief. He knew that his chances of escaping had greatly increased. Seizing the fortune of heaven and earth, invading the mysteries of chaos, using the chaotic starry sky as a chessboard, using the stars as chess pieces, and everything within sight obeys his orders. This is a Chaos Star Master. Gai Tianyuan hurriedly explained. Gai Tianyuan was afraid that Yi Xian did not know how terrifying a Chaos Star Master was, so he quickly explained to Yi Xian, using the chaotic universe as a chessboard, using everything in the world as chess pieces, and being the chess player, this is also a Chaos Star Master. What great courage! Yi Xian muttered with a heavy gaze. Using the chaotic universe as a chessboard, using everything in the world as chess pieces, this was simply arrogant to the extreme. In the entire chaos world, no one except the strongest throughout history would dare to make such a bold statement. Little friend, you should know that only one strongest throughout history can be born in every Yuan Hui, right? Gai Tianyuan's eyes turned as he lowered his voice. What are you trying to say? Yi Xian felt that Gai Tianyuan was implying something, which made his heart skip a beat. He knew that Gai Tianyuan was about to reveal a big secret. What I want to say is very simple. Gai Tianyuan smiled mysteriously. Although Chaos Star Masters are not well known, they are an extremely terrifying existence, almost comparable to the strongest throughout history. What? Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed. Although he'd guessed that Chaos Star Masters were very powerful, he didn't expect them to be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the strongest of all time. This caused Yi Xian to go pale with fright. Looks like you are very surprised, little friend. Gai Tianyuan smiled and explained, everyone only knows that one Yuanhui can only produce one strongest throughout history, but they do not know that every Yuanhui can produce another Chaos Star Master. And the Chaos Star Master of the 10th Yuanhui has yet to be born. Although Chaos Star Masters are not enough to defeat the strongest throughout history, the strongest throughout history can't do anything to Chaos Star Masters. Primal Chaos 1 strongest and Yuanhui 1 Star Master. Every Yuanhui will give birth to a Primal Chaos 1 strongest and a Primal Chaos Star Master. The Lord of all spirits is too greedy. He has already become the strongest of the 10th epoch, yet he still wants to become a Chaos Star Master. Gai Tianyuan sneered. At this moment, Yi Xian's heart was in turmoil, but his face was extremely calm. However, he was shocked by this secret, and his eyes were burning with passion. Yi Xian wouldn't believe it if someone told him that he didn't want this inheritance, but Yi Xian knew that Gai Tianyuan was tempting him to help him escape. What do you mean by telling me all this? Yi Xian pretended to be calm and did not reveal any strange expression. Little friend Yi, as long as you help me escape, I can help you become a Chaos Star Master, Gai Tianyuan said solemnly. Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child that's easy to trick? Yi Xian laughed, but it was a contemptuous laugh. He looked at Gai Tianyuan as if he was looking at an idiot. If he let Gai Tianyuan out, the first to die would be him. Why would Yi Xian do something so stupid? Little friend, don't misunderstand. As long as you let me out, I won't harm you. Instead, I'll tell you how to become a Chaos Star Master. Moreover, you cultivate the power of space-time. Even if I want to harm you, you can escape with the power of space-time, Gai Tianyuan said sincerely. Hearing Gai Tianyuan's words, Yi Xian frowned and fell silent. Just as Gai Tianyuan said, he had the power of space-time. Even if he wasn't Gai Tianyuan's match, it wouldn't be that easy for him to kill him. However, Yi Xian wasn't sure if Gai Tianyuan was lying to him about becoming a Chaos Star Master. Perhaps sensing Yi Xian's doubts, Gai Tianyuan hurriedly said, back when the Lord of all spirits destroyed my Tianyuan kingdom, he searched everywhere for the inheritance of a Chaos Star Master, but in the end, he returned empty-handed. Actually, he didn't know that to become a Chaos Star Master, one has to go through the Chaos Trial, and this trial is the 99,999 restrictions. Gai Tianyuan stopped abruptly. Clearly, he didn't want to reveal the secret of how to become a Chaos Star Master. Yi Xian wasn't blinded by greed. Instead, he looked at Gai Tianyuan with a clear mind. I'm very curious. Since you have the inheritance of a Chaos Star Master, why didn't you become a Chaos Star Master yourself? Instead, you were killed by the Lord of all spirits and left with only a wisp of your soul. Sigh. Young friend, you might not know this, but it's not that easy to become a Chaos Star Master. Just like how the strongest of all eternity has to cultivate step by step, back then. Gai Tianyuan recounted the past. The so-called Tianyuan kingdom was actually a trial ground. Only by passing the trial could one become a Chaos Star Master. Unfortunately, Gai Tianyuan didn't pass the trial. However, he still grasped some Chaos Star Master techniques, which was why he could compete with the Lord of all spirits. However, the Lord of all spirits was too strong. Before he could become the strongest of all eternity in the 10th Eon, he had already killed his way to his doorstep. Not only did he destroy the Tianyuan kingdom, but he also destroyed Gai Tianyuan's soul. In the end, he escaped with only a wisp of his soul. However, before the Lord of all Spirits left, perhaps sensing that Gai Tianyuan wasn't truly dead, he left behind 1,000,000 spirit blood pearl to destroy Gai Tianyuan's soul. One had to admit that Chaos Star Masters were extremely powerful. Although Gai Tianyuan only had a wisp of his soul left, he managed to block the 1,000,000 spirit blood pearl with his half-baked Chaos Star Master techniques and luckily escaped with his life. However, he was also trapped in the 10,000th restriction. The 1,000,000 spirit blood pearl targeted the soul and brought him great pain every day. Sooner or later, he would be destroyed by it. Coincidentally, when Sage King Tailing entered the Tianyuan kingdom 30 million years ago, Gai Tianyuan immediately lured him into the restriction and took his body. That was how he managed to survive until now. He controlled Sage King Tailing's body and walked out of the outside world, searching for a way to escape. In the end, he came to a conclusion. If his soul wanted to escape, he had to break the 1,000,000 spirit blood pearl. Gai Tianyuan didn't dare to find a creation realm cultivator because his soul was no match for one. Although he could unleash the power of a creation realm cultivator, he was only a wisp of his soul and was naturally countered by the 1,000,000 spirit blood pearl. Those below creation realm would find it very difficult to break the 1,000,000 spirit blood pearl. Therefore, Gai Tianyuan was stuck in a dilemma. Coincidentally, Yi Xian appeared before Gai Tianyuan. He was a supreme saint, but his body was terrifyingly strong. He could break the 1,000,000 spirit blood pearl and free him. That was why this happened. Little friend, I don't want to talk nonsense. I'm only a wisp of my soul now. If you help me escape, I'll keep my promise and tell you how to become a Chaos Star Master, Gai Tianyuan said in a low voice and looked at Yi Xian sincerely. Chapter 1139. Gai Tianyuan believed that Yi Xian would agree because no one could resist the temptation of a Chaos Star Master. Unfortunately, Gai Tianyuan was wrong. Sorry, Chaos Star Master is good, but I need to be alive to get it. Wait until I reach the creation realm, then I'll come back and make this deal with you. That's the safest way. Yi Xian sneered and disappeared from Gai Tianyuan's sight. Junior, you. Gai Tianyuan was stunned when he saw Yi Xian leave. He never thought that Yi Xian would be able to resist the temptation of a Chaos Star Master. Damned dog. The next moment, Gai Tianyuan went completely berserk. If Yi Xian's identity were to spread, it would definitely bring him a life and death calamity. Unfortunately, Yi Xian was already far away, and only Gai Tianyuan's angry roar could be heard behind him. Chi! Yi Xian traveled through time and space. With the power of time and space, he chose to ignore the restrictions on the mountain path and appeared at the peak of the mountain in an instant. A vast palace bloomed with majestic divine light. Yi Xian's eyes lit up. Without hesitation, he turned into a streak of light and entered the Heaven Divine Palace. Yi Xian was indeed envious of a Chaos Star Master, but Yi Xian knew his limits. No matter what Gai Tianyuan said, he would not let Gai Tianyuan out. Of course, Yi Xian was not too afraid of Gai Tianyuan's creation realm cultivation. After all, he had the power of time and space. If he could not beat him, couldn't he just run? What truly made Yi Xian fearful was that Gai Tianyuan was able to compete with the Lord of all Spirits in the past and had even grasped some of the methods of a Chaos Star Master. This kind of person had countless trump cards and definitely couldn't be treated as a creation realm expert. As the saying went, it was better to be safe than sorry. Yi Xian did not want to fail miserably. The most important thing now was to reach the Saint King realm. That was what he should do. In the Heaven Divine Palace. Nothing. Nothing. Yi Xian's face was as gloomy as water. A terrifying tyrannical aura surrounded his body. This was because he had walked through the entire Heaven Divine Palace and only saw bones everywhere. The Dam Pavilion and the Scripture Pavilion were all empty. He did not even see a single Heaven Origin Dan. I miscalculated. Yi Xian growled as he paced back and forth in the Sky Origin Divine Palace. Clearly, when the Lord of all Spirits destroyed the Tian Yuan Kingdom, he must have taken away all the cultivation resources. Now that the Heaven Divine Hall was only an empty shell, Yi Xian found it unacceptable. Yi Xian had entered Tian Yuan Kingdom in order to obtain the cultivation resources of Tian Yuan Kingdom so that he could step into the Saint King realm. But now, there was nothing in Tian Yuan Kingdom. Wasn't this a waste of time? As the saying goes, a thief never leaves empty-handed. Although this saying did not apply to Yi Xian would not have come here empty-handed. This was not in his character, and he was unwilling to accept it. In the fight for the Great Way, one would fall behind if they did not advance. Yi Xian understood one thing very well. In this chaotic world, there was no lack of so-called amazing talents. These people were gifted and had all kinds of combat constitutions. They had the protection of the great sects and countless cultivation resources to enjoy. What about Yi Xian? He was all alone. He did not have the protection of the great sects, he did not have a powerful combat constitution, and he did not have the so-called cultivation resources. If Yi Xian wanted to rise in the chaotic world, he would have to take it by himself. Burning, killing, looting, and doing anything to achieve his goal. Yi Xian did everything so that he would not fall behind others. He was not Lu Bai, who had the top talent of all time. Cultivation was as simple as drinking water and eating. He was also not one of those amazing talents who could go smoothly on the path of cultivation. He had relied on himself all the way and stepped on piles of corpses to move forward. If he did not have something, he would snatch it. If others had something, he would snatch it. If they did not give it to him, he would kill them, or even kill their entire family and destroy their great sections. All good things belonged to him, Yi Xian. This was Yi Xian's principle of doing things. He had also come this way. But today, he did not even find a single primary heaven elixir. The entire Tianyuan kingdom was just an empty shell. This was simply unacceptable to Yi Xian. Gai Tianyuan. Chaotic Star Master. Yi Xian gradually calmed down. His eyes became abnormally deep. It was definitely not Yi Xian's character to let him return empty-handed. Moreover, Yi Xian was very clear about one thing. He had killed Holy King Hun Tian. The 10,000 Spirit Palace would definitely settle the score with him. With his current cultivation of a great saint, it was tantamount to hitting a stone with an egg. Therefore, he had to step into the Saint King realm. This was because Yi Xian did not want to wait until he met Lu Bai in the future. He still needed Lu Bai's protection. This had nothing to do with brotherhood, but it would hurt Yi Xian's self-esteem. Yi Xian was a proud person. He would not allow himself to be stagnant. Qi. Yi Xian took a step forward and instantly disappeared from the Heaven Divine Palace. At the bottom of the mountain, Gai Tianyuan angrily paced around the restriction. He was emitting an extremely malicious aura. Holy King Yin Hai was trembling in the distance. Old Mother Nine Ways and Dao Cloud Holy King were wailing in the blood pool. Their flesh and blood were dissipating, and they were almost turning into bones. Despicable Junior, Despicable Junior. Gai Tianyuan roared with hatred. He was extremely violent, but there was deep helplessness in his eyes. He never thought that after he told Yi Xian about the secrets of the Chaos Star Masters, Yi Xian would actually leave. This was simply unacceptable to him. Gai Tianyuan. Weng. The void rippled and spread. Yi Xian silently appeared outside the restriction. He was looking at Gai Tianyuan calmly. Yi Xian. Gai Tianyuan was stunned. Then, he was overjoyed. Can you really help me become a chaotic star master? Yi Xian asked in a deep voice. Gai Tianyuan suppressed the joy in his heart and said seriously, I can't guarantee it. Only by passing the chaos trial will you have the right to become a chaotic star master. If you can't pass the chaos trial, then there's nothing I can do. Alright, I'll let you out. But before that, I have to remind you that if you dare to lie to me, I'll use the power of time and space to leave the Heaven Divine Kingdom. I'll also tell the outside world about your identity. You should know better than me what will happen to you then, Yi Xian said coldly. Little friend, don't worry. I won't lie to you. Gai Tianyuan hurriedly promised. Alright. Yi Xian didn't say anything else. As the saying went, fortune comes from danger. He had to become a sacred king. Although this deal was dangerous, he had to do it for his own cultivation. Bang! The 10,000 spirits blood pearl was directly crushed in Yi Xian's hand. The 10,000 spirits blood pool within the restriction shook violently before disappearing from the restriction with a bang. I'm out. I'm out. Woo! Gai Tianyuan instantly appeared on the mountain path. He was controlling Great Spirit Sacred King's body. At this moment, his remnant soul was supporting his body. He was bursting with terrifying creation holy light as he roared excitedly. At the same time, Sacred King Yin Hai and the other two also escaped. However, Old Mother Juku and Daoyun's Sacred King were as thin as sticks. Clearly, they had suffered great injuries in the 10,000 spirit blood pool. Now, can you tell me how to become a chaotic star master? Yi Xian's eyes were cold. Space-time power surrounded him. If Gai Tianyuan dared to attack him, he would immediately escape the Tianyuan kingdom and tell the outside world about Gai Tianyuan's identity. Fortunately, Gai Tianyuan didn't show any killing intent. Clearly, he was very smart. He knew that with Yi Xian's space-time power, he wouldn't be able to keep Yi Xian here. Little friend, thank you for helping me escape. Gai Tianyuan calmed himself down and first bowed to Yi Xian to express his gratitude. Then, he slowly explained the secret of becoming a chaotic star master. In order to become a chaotic star master, one had to unlock these 99,999 restrictions. It couldn't be broken by brute force. As long as one could unlock all of these restrictions, the inheritance of a chaotic star master would naturally appear. That's simple. Yi Xian was stunned by Gai Tianyuan's explanation. Simple. Gai Tianyuan smiled coldly. These 99,999 restrictions involve the mysteries of the chaotic universe. They're extremely complex formations that can transform the primal chaos. Without unparalleled talent, it'll be nearly impossible to undo them. Back then, I spent 50 million years and only managed to unlock around 80,000 restrictions. In the end, it was all for naught. Otherwise, how could the Lord of all Spirits kill me if I obtained the inheritance of a chaotic star master? Gai Tianyuan sneered. In that case, if I can't unlock these restrictions, I won't be able to obtain the inheritance of a chaotic star master. Yi Xian said with a gloomy expression. Gai Tianyuan clearly knew this was the case. That was why he told Yi Xian the secret of becoming a chaotic star master. He didn't expect Yi Xian to be able to unlock these restrictions. Little friend, I've already given you such a great opportunity. As for whether you can obtain it or not, it's all up to you. Gai Tianyuan smirked with contempt in his eyes. Chapter 1140. It wasn't that Gai Tianyuan looked down on Yi Xian, but the primal chaos trial was almost impossible to complete. Even he, who had the heavenly origin combat body, couldn't complete the trial in the past. How could Yi Xian, who had a mortal body, succeed? Looking at Gai Tianyuan's fearless appearance, Yi Xian instantly understood what he was thinking. However, Yi Xian was a person who didn't believe in fate. He wanted to see how difficult the primal chaos trial was. However, before that, Yi Xian still had a very important thing to do. Boom! Yi Xian explosively attacked, and the Calamity Immortal technique was activated. Old Mother Juku and Dao Cloud Saint King were instantly covered by the black fog that filled the sky. Their originally skinny flesh and blood instantly melted. Ah! The two Saint Kings screamed miserably as they were swallowed by the Calamity Transcender technique, giving them an unimaginable calamity. Yi Daoyu, what are you doing? Saint King Yin Hai, who was at the side, roared in shock. He took 3 steps back and looked at Yi Xian with an extremely horrified expression. Not to mention Saint King Yin Hai, even Gai Tianyuan was stunned. He didn't expect Yi Xian to be so vicious as to take the lives of 2 Saint Kings. However, in the next moment, Gai Tianyuan understood why Yi Xian did this. Rumble. The 2 Saint Kings screamed miserably as they died. Their blood soul essence qi was completely swallowed by Yi Xian. An extremely terrifying energy overflowed from Yi Xian's body, and even his body was constantly swaying. It's the devouring technique again. Gai Tianyuan's eyes flickered as he muttered gloomily. He had seen Yi Xian use this technique in the Holy Land of Taichu. At first, he thought that Yi Xian was from the heaven-devouring demonic palace, but Yi Xian didn't admit it. What a mysterious junior. The power of time and space and the devouring technique. Just these 2 powers are related to the 2 great temples. Where did this person come from? If I let him continue devouring like this, I'm afraid it won't take long for this junior to surpass me. Gai Tianyuan looked calm on the surface, but he was actually having a hard time calming down. The more time he spent with Yi Xian, the more he couldn't see through Yi Xian. Fortunately, this kid only had a mortal body, and he could at most cultivate to the 3 realms of creation and creation. He could forget about stepping into the yin-yang and yang realms in this lifetime. Thinking of this, Gai Tianyuan felt a little comforted. He allowed Yi Xian to devour the cultivation of the 2 Saint Kings as he remained extremely calm. Yi Xian spat out a mouthful of turbid air as the Calamity Immortal technique gradually dissipated. The 2 Saint Kings had died without even leaving behind their bones. As for Yi Xian, his complexion was flushed red and his aura had strengthened by a great deal. After devouring the cultivations of 2 saint rulers, Yi Xian felt that he was only 1 step away from the saint ruler realm. However, taking this step would require a massive amount of cultivation resources. Fellow Taoist Yi, you. Cold sweat poured down Saint King Yin Hai's forehead as he looked at Yi Xian in horror. His eyes were filled with fear. But it was a pity that Yi Xian did not even look at Saint King Yin Hai in the eye. He took down the heaven and earth pouches of the 2 Saint Kings and kept them in. Within them were the treasures that the 2 of them had obtained from the seal. Do you want to ask why I didn't get devoured by my heart demons after killing the 2 of them even though I swore a heart-blood oath? Yi Xian looked at Saint King Yin Hai from the corner of his eyes. No. Saint King Yin Hai waved his hands hurriedly as he forced out a smile on his face. However, this smile of his was uglier than crying. That was because he could feel the killing intent in Yi Xian's eyes. Suddenly, Saint King Yin Hai took out the Heaven Essence pill and handed it over to Yi Xian with a trembling hand. He even lowered his stance and said, Yi Daoyu, this Heaven Essence pill was yours to begin with. Now, it's returned to its rightful owner. I have no grudges with you, fellow Taoist. I hope that you can spare my life, fellow Taoist. The Heaven Essence pill and the Heaven Mending pill were equally famous. They were known as the 2 greatest miraculous pills in the world. Naturally, Yi Xian would not let this chance slip by. With this Heaven Essence pill, he would definitely be able to step into the Saint Ruler state. Yi Xian kept the Heaven Essence pill in his pouch. But in the next moment, the power of time and space burst forth and enveloped Saint King Yin Hai. Saint King Yin Hai had been guarding against Yi Xian the entire time. The moment Yi Xian made a move on him, he wanted to escape immediately. But it was a pity that the power of time and space was one of the 12 strongest powers in chaos. Even though Saint King Yin Hai was prepared for it, he could not escape from the power of time and space. Yi Xian, you'll die a horrible death. Rumble. Saint King Yin Hai cursed. But the power of time and space was simply too terrifying. Instantly, he was shredded into a bloody mist. Only his dying voice could be heard reverberating throughout the world. The Calamity Immortal technique was activated once more. The blood soul essence chi of Saint King Yin Hai was devoured by Yi Xian. After everything was done, Yi Xian's lips curled into a satisfied smile. What a vicious heart. What a terrifying power of time and space. I'm afraid that even the 9 heaven Saint Kings are no match for you, Gai Tianyuan said coldly. Same here. You, Gai Tianyuan, are not a merciful person. What's more, those who achieve great things do not care about trifles. They are weak, so they deserve to die. Am I wrong? Yi Xian looked at Gai Tianyuan with a sneer. You are very strong. You can kill Saint Kings like killing chickens as a great sage. With this cultivation alone, you are not inferior to those peerless geniuses. But don't be too proud. Those monstrous geniuses can also kill 9 heaven Saint Kings at the Great Saint Realm. You've only killed some ordinary Saint Kings. If you encounter those monstrous geniuses, I'm afraid you'll become a skeleton under their feet. Gai Tianyuan's expression did not change. Then let's wait and see. Yi Xian did not bother to argue with Gai Tianyuan. He was just walking his own path. Sooner or later, he would prove that he was not weaker than anyone. No matter if you were a peerless genius or a peerless genius, as long as you blocked Yi Xian's path, you would all be dead. But you did well. Even if you didn't kill them, I would have killed them. After all, they knew my identity and saw you use the power of time and space. I think you killed them because you didn't want to expose the power of time and space, right? Gai Tianyuan looked at Yi Xian with a mocking expression. Cut the crap. It's time for you to fulfill your promise. Yi Xian did not have time to waste with Gai Tianyuan. He only wanted to enter the Primal Chaos trial and see the inheritance of the Primal Chaos Star Master. That was what he wanted, 99,999 restrictions. The first 10,000 are just ordinary restrictions. It can't be called the Primal Chaos trial. From the 10,001st restriction onwards, it is called the Primal Chaos trial. Remember, do not break it with brute force. Don't even think about using your power of time and space to pass through the restrictions. Only by relying on yourself to break these restrictions can you see the inheritance of the Primal Chaos Star Master. After Gai Tianyuan finished speaking, he actually wanted to take the lead and step into the 10,001st restriction. This caused Yi Xian's expression to slightly change as he said, "You also want to enter the Primal Chaos trial? What a joke. I only agreed to give you the opportunity to become a Primal Chaos Star Master. I didn't say I wouldn't fight with you for the inheritance," Gai Tianyuan said disdainfully as he entered the Primal Chaos trial. Chapter 1141. Chaos Star Master. An existence comparable to the strongest throughout history. Only one Yuan Hui could be born. How could Gai Tianyuan give such a great opportunity to Yi Xian? This is getting interesting. Yi Xian's eyes turned cold. He wasn't afraid of Gai Tianyuan's tricks and quickly stepped into the chaos trial. Rumble. In the next moment, Yi Xian felt the world spin as the laws around him interweaved. There was even an obscure energy rippling around him, and Gai Tianyuan was right in front of him, walking towards the next restriction with large strides. Junior, have a good taste of the chaos trial. I'll go first. Gai Tianyuan turned his head around to look at Yi Xian with disdain. Then, he walked forward with extremely strange steps and instantly left Yi Xian's line of sight. Gai Tianyuan was clearly very familiar with the chaos trial. He had been through it before, so the restriction before him naturally couldn't trap him. Seeing that Gai Tianyuan had already disappeared, it was obvious that he'd entered the next restriction. This caused Yi Xian to frown as he similarly walked forward. Chi! Chi! Suddenly, Yi Xian had just taken a step when formation runes filled the sky and directly attacked Yi Xian. Yi Xian hurriedly retreated, and the formation runes disappeared again. Formation runes intertwined, laws born, heaven and earth changed, shifting positions. Looks like the Chaos Star Master's inheritance is related to formations, Yi Xian muttered. Yi Xian wasn't completely clueless about formations. In the past, he had created the primal chaos Empyrean formation in the primeval world, so he had some understanding of formations. I can't break through them with brute force, so I can only break through them one by one. Yi Xian seemed to have understood something. He gradually calmed his fluctuating emotions and began to comprehend the restriction he was in, hoping to find the way to the next restriction. Kan's position is on the left, Kun's position is in front. Shift and change positions, changing constantly. Although Yi Xian wasn't a world-shaking genius, he wasn't a fool either. He studied the restriction array in front of him for a bit, and it didn't take him more than 10 breaths to figure out the mystery behind it. Go! Yi Xian smiled faintly. Just like Gai Tianyuan, he walked out of this place with strange steps and directly appeared in the next restriction. Heaven and earth are formless, and the Big Dipper leads the way. It's extremely simple. The second restriction array was also unlocked by Yi Xian. He then entered the third restriction array. On the other side, Gai Tianyuan had already walked past more than 10,000 restriction arrays. It was as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. He had once walked through the primal chaos trials, so the first few tens of thousands of restrictions posed no difficulty to him at all. Back then, he had been defeated in the last 10,000 restrictions, which was why he had missed out on the inheritance of a primal chaos star master. However, after being trapped in the Tianyuan kingdom for so many years, he had been studying the Tao of formations all this time. He boasted that his Tao of formations had reached greater mastery and that he had great hopes of solving all the primal chaos trials and obtaining the Chaos Star Master's legacy. So fast. Suddenly, Gai Tianyuan's footsteps paused. He turned back slightly because he sensed that Yi Xian had actually unlocked hundreds of restrictions in a short period of time and was steadily advancing. Your aptitude is not bad, and you have some talent in the Tao of formations. Unfortunately, the primal chaos trials are not as simple as you think. The further you go, the more difficult it will be. When you encounter true danger, even the power of space-time won't be able to save you, Gai Tianyuan said in a low voice. Clearly, Gai Tianyuan wasn't so kind as to really give Yi Xian the Chaos Star Master's legacy. He had told Yi Xian the secret of the Chaos Star Master so that Yi Xian would enter the primal chaos trials. In Gai Tianyuan's heart, Yi Xian was already on the list of people who must die. However, Yi Xian had the power of space-time, so it would be extremely difficult for him to kill Yi Xian. Therefore, he wanted to use the primal chaos trials to kill Yi Xian. Of course, the primal chaos trials were real, and so was the Chaos Star Master's legacy. Gai Tianyuan wasn't lying about any of this. However, there was one thing he didn't tell Yi Xian. Only those in the creation realm could enter the primal chaos trials. Those below the creation realm who entered the primal chaos trials would only die. The early stages of the primal chaos trials weren't anything special. However, the later stages would become more dangerous. Only those in the creation realm would be able to unravel the restrictions later on. At that time, Yi Xian would be in danger, and even the power of space-time wouldn't be able to save him. This was Gai Tianyuan's plan to kill with a borrowed knife. Telling Yi Xian about this opportunity was only so that he could truly kill Yi Xian. That was his true goal. On the other side, Yi Xian had already broken through 1,000 restriction arrays, and his pace gradually slowed down. This was because he could completely feel that as he broke through these restriction arrays, the restrictions that appeared behind him became more and more powerful, causing him to feel a headache. The gates of life and death are staggered. What a profound array. Yi Xian stopped in his tracks and frowned. He was studying the restriction he was in. After half a day, he finally unraveled it. I see. Although Yi Xian had been comprehending the array restrictions the entire time, his mind was extremely clear. In this instant, he seemed to have understood something. The so-called primal chaos trials are a learning process. This is the true essence of the primal chaos trials, Yi Xian murmured. His eyes gradually brightened. Start from the basics to the basics. Apply what you've learned. Understand the changes of the primal chaos. Understand the mysteries of the sun and moon. Understand the primal chaos universe. Understand the true essence of all things. Yi Xian was pleasantly surprised. So that's it. So that's it. Yi Xian's face flushed. He instantly understood the true essence of the primal chaos trials. To put it bluntly, the primal chaos trials were a process of cultivating the Tao of formations. As long as Yi Xian could completely comprehend these restrictions, he would become a formation grandmaster. And if he became a formation grandmaster, he would naturally be able to see the inheritance of the primal chaos star masters. This was the true essence of the primal chaos trials. At this moment, Yi Xian thought of Lu Bai. If Lu Bai was here, the primal chaos trials would be easy for him. He would definitely be able to obtain the inheritance of the primal chaos star masters. Unfortunately, Lu Bai wasn't here. It was a pity. However, Yi Xian wouldn't give up on the opportunity in his hands. Although he didn't have the talent of Lu Bai, the #1 talent in all of history, he wouldn't let go of this great opportunity that was placed in front of him. Finally, Yi Xian calmed down and began to seriously study the Tao of formations. His entire body and mind were immersed in the primal chaos trials. Yi Xian wasn't stupid. On the contrary, he was very smart. When he removed all distracting thoughts and focused all his attention on studying the Tao of formations, his understanding of the Tao of formations became deeper and deeper. 1 restriction array, 10 restriction arrays, 100 restriction arrays, 1,000 restriction arrays, 10,000 restriction arrays. He forgot to eat and sleep and was completely focused. Yi Xian was completely immersed in the Tao of formations. He had completely forgotten the concept of time. He was greedily absorbing the knowledge regarding the Tao of formations. Unknowingly, he had already walked past 10,000 restrictions. And Yi Xian had used 200,000 years to comprehend 10,000 restrictions. This was an extremely long time, but the things it brought to Yi Xian were unimaginable. Open. Naturally, the Tao of formations intertwined. Specks of starlight appeared at the tip of Yi Xian's finger. When he pointed out, the 10,000th restriction array suddenly opened. He took a step forward and reappeared on the mountain path. He could even see Gai Tianyuan's blurry figure in front of him. The primal chaos universe, unity of heaven and man. So the Tao of formations is so vast. It can mobilize the mighty force of the primal chaos, overturn the mysteries of the world, move mountains and rivers with a thought, and turn the stars into chess pieces with a flip of the hand. No wonder Brother Bai Yi was so obsessed with the Tao of formations in the past. Yi Xian was filled with many emotions. When he walked past the 10,000th restriction array, he had undergone an unimaginable transformation. This transformation had nothing to do with his cultivation. Instead, it was the application and understanding of the Tao of formations. Yi Xian had gained a few more terrifying techniques. To make a simple analogy, Yi Xian had once needed to use his cultivation to kill a sage king. But now, he didn't need to use his cultivation. He could rely on the Tao of formations alone to stand in an invincible position. Of course, this was only the beginning. He had only comprehended 10,000th restriction array. There were still many things he needed to learn. If he could finish the primal chaos trials, he would definitely become a peerless Tao of formations grandmaster. Let's go. Yi Xian stepped into the primal chaos trials again and continued to comprehend the Tao of formations. His speed gradually increased, and his understanding of the Tao of formations also deepened. The speed at which he dissolved the restrictions also became more and more terrifying. His entire person was undergoing an indescribable qualitative change. Only one Chaos Star Master could be born in every Yuanhui. Seizing the mysteries of the primal chaos universe, using the primal chaos myriad beings as chess pieces, using the primal chaos as the chessboard, and seeing all things as chess pieces. The Chaos Star Master was the chess piece. If Yi Xian could really become a Chaos Star Master, the benefits would be unimaginable. Now, Yi Xian was in the process of accumulating strength. He had devoured 3 Sage Kings and had a Heaven Origin pill in hand. His cultivation was already at an extremely terrifying critical point. As the saying went, if he could obtain the opportunity to become a Chaos Star Master, coupled with the boundless potential that was about to erupt, who knew what kind of terrifying changes would occur? Chapter 1142. What was a Chaos Star Master? A blade of grass could split the sky, a grain of sand could fill the sea, and anything could be turned into something magical in their hands. This was a Chaos Star Master. Everything in the chaotic universe could be controlled by a Chaos Star Master. Even a blade of grass or a grain of sand could become a terrifying weapon of mass destruction in the hands of a Chaos Star Master. This was also why only one Chaos Star Master could be born in a Yuanhui. Yi Xian advanced at a steady pace, completely immersed in the sea of wisdom of formations. He absorbed all knowledge about formations at a frenzied pace, and his understanding of formations became more and more frightening. Mystic position changes, illusion positions bewilder the eyes, great praise. Yi Xian took a step forward, and the formations behind him dissipated like bubbles. With every formation he walked past, he grasped the essence of each formation and made it his own. Another 10,000 formations were walked past, and this time, Yi Xian only spent 100,000 years. However, he didn't feel any joy, and instead continued forward calmly. Everything returned to one, and all paths led to the same destination. Apart from the requirements of one's talent, the most important thing to cultivating formations was to have a heart that was neither arrogant nor impatient, a heart that could endure loneliness. Although Yi Xian didn't have Liu Bai's #1 talent of all time, his heart had long been tempered to be as firm as a rock, and he also had unimaginable willpower. It was also through great willpower that Yi Xian could reach where he was today, and he believed that he wouldn't be inferior to anyone in the future. Rumble. Yi Xian slowly walked as the formation behind him dissipated like a bubble. The speed at which he comprehended these formations was extremely fast, and it had already reached an extremely terrifying level. How is this possible? Why is it like this? Gai Tianyuan turned around in shock. He could already faintly see that Yi Xian was halfway up the mountain. The other party had already passed through 20,000 restriction formations. This was simply unimaginable to him. 300,000 years, he actually used 300,000 years to walk past 20,000 formations? Gai Tianyuan's expression was sinister, and his mind was in turmoil. Gai Tianyuan couldn't be blamed for being so shocked. Back in the day, he had used an entire million years to walk past 20,000 formations, and Yi Xian had done it 3 times faster than him. Impossible, how is this possible? Gai Tianyuan muttered in shock, this kid is just a mortal, and I have the heavenly origin battle body. How is he able to comprehend formations faster than me? Gai Tianyuan's mind was in turmoil, and he simply couldn't accept this. Fortunately, he quickly calmed himself, and a cold smile. Even if you have some talent in the Tao of formations, there's no way you'll be able to pass through these 60,000 formations. They'll definitely take your life. Gai Tianyuan sneered cruelly and began to comprehend the formations before him again. It had to be said that Gai Tianyuan was truly a monstrous genius. He was able to compete with the Lord of all spirits in the past, and that was also why he was so outstanding. Gai Tianyuan was currently only 9,999 formations away from the Chaos Trial. This was also the last 10,000 formations. As long as he could pass through the last 10,000 formations, he would be able to pass the chaos trial. Yi Xian was 60,000 formations away from Gai Tianyuan. This was an extremely terrifying number. It would be extremely difficult for Yi Xian to catch up to Gai Tianyuan. Fortunately, Gai Tianyuan was also having a hard time. This was because the last 9,999 formations were the most terrifying part of the chaos trial. Every single formation was extremely dangerous, and a single misstep could lead to Gai Tianyuan's death. 10,000 years, 20,000 years, 50,000 years. Another 50,000 years passed, and Gai Tianyuan only managed to comprehend 10 formations. He was completely out of breath, and he gave off a feeling of mental and physical exhaustion. Every single formation in the last 9,000 plus formations was extremely terrifying. It required the trial taker to devote all of their attention to comprehending them. The amount of mental and physical exhaustion was simply unimaginable. Huff. 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 Gai Tianyuan constantly panted as beads of sweat dripped down his face. Just comprehending 10 formations had taken him 50,000 years. He was completely exhausted, and he wanted nothing more than to have a good sleep. Rumble. Suddenly, a violent rumble rang out from behind Gai Tianyuan. He turned around in fright, and he was instantly stunned on the spot. How is this possible? Gai Tianyuan roared in shock when he saw what was happening halfway up the mountain. Yi Xian had comprehended the 30,000th formation again, and this time, it had only taken him 50,000 years. Impossible. How is this possible? The later formations become more and more difficult. How can he be so fast? Gai Tianyuan roared furiously. His eyes were already filled with panic. If this continued, Yi Xian would catch up to him sooner or later before he could even pass the primal chaos trials. This made his heart palpitate. Stinking brat, I refuse to believe your luck is that good. Let's see how far you can go, Gai Tianyuan muttered hatefully. He began to comprehend the 11th formation again. Time flew by like a white steed passing a crack. Another 30,000 years passed, and Gai Tianyuan had only comprehended 2 more formations. However, another rumble came from behind him. Yi Xian had actually passed through the 40,000th formation. Damn it! Gai Tianyuan roared furiously. His eyes had already turned scarlet. He sped up his comprehension of the formations in front of him as if he had gone mad. A great sense of urgency filled his heart. As the saying goes, one can't eat hot tofu in a hurry. Moreover, the Tao of formations had to be done step by step. Under the pressure given by Yi Xian, Gai Tianyuan's mind was unstable as he tried to comprehend the restriction formation. This caused a huge problem. Puff! Gai Tianyuan spat out a mouthful of blood. He collapsed to the ground. He had suffered a backlash from the primal chaos trials. If he didn't have the heavenly origin battle body and his soul was extremely powerful, the backlash from the primal chaos trials would have killed him. Damn it! Gai Tianyuan struggled to get up. He knew he had committed a grave mistake. He quickly calmed his mind and began to treat his injuries. He temporarily stopped paying attention to Yi Xian. On the other side, Yi Xian was strolling forward, as if he was leisurely strolling through a courtyard. He was comprehending the Tao of formation restrictions in an orderly manner. He'd completely forgotten about Gai Tianyuan's existence and was completely immersed in the sea of knowledge. Another 20,000 years passed. Yi Xian passed through the 50,000th formation and stepped into the 60,000th formation without stopping. This time, it took even less time. Yi Xian only took 15,000 years to pass through the 60,000th formation. Yi Xian took 10,000 years to pass through the 70,000th formation. Yi Xian took 8,000 years to pass through the 80,000th formation. When Yi Xian walked out of the 80,000th formation, he was still immersed in the Tao of formations. It wasn't until Gai Tianyuan's figure appeared in front of him that Yi Xian woke up. Chapter 1143. Yi Xian, your perception has indeed made me look at you in a whole new light. Just based on your perception, you can be called a genius just by being able to catch up in hundreds of thousands of years. Gai Tianyuan clasped his hands behind his back. His expression was extremely calm, as if he didn't care that Yi Xian had caught up to him. He even looked at Yi Xian as if he was the ruler of the world. However, if one looked closely, they would notice that Gai Tianyuan's hands were tightly clenched. Terrifying veins were squirming on his palms, proving just how furious he was. There were 80,000 chaos trials. Gai Tianyuan had used 10 million years to pass them, but how much time had Yi Xian used? Not even 500,000 years. There was a 20-fold difference between 500,000 years and 10 million years. This made Gai Tianyuan extremely furious. Who was he? He was Gai Tianyuan. He had the Tianyuan battle physique. He had once competed with the Lord of all spirits. He was known as a world-shaking genius of that era. But now, he couldn't even compare to a junior. How could he not be ashamed and furious? Pointing at the sky and drawing the earth, shifting the stars, moving the sun, moon, mountains, and rivers, all in the palm of my hand. Yi Xian smiled. If it weren't for you, Gai Tianyuan, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to obtain such a great opportunity. I really have to thank you. You. Gai Tianyuan's blood boiled. His chest was about to explode from anger. He almost spat out a mouthful of blood, but he forcefully swallowed it back down. Yi Xian, don't be so smug. The last 9,999 seals aren't that easy to pass. I'm afraid you won't even know how you died. But don't worry. Since you saved me, I'll personally build you a coffin after you die. I'll definitely give you a proper burial. Gai Tianyuan sneered. I won't die before you do. I'll leave that coffin for you. Yi Xian retorted. He strode into the first seal. Rumble. Stars filled the sky as the world turned upside down, and the markings of stars that covered the sky interweaved as strands of star annihilation flooded towards Yi Xian. The last 9,999 restrictions were extremely terrifying, and any living being below the creation realm that entered them would definitely die. Ha ha ha. Gai Tianyuan laughed wildly and said, Junior, I forgot to tell you that without the cultivation of the creation realm, the last 9,999 restrictions will take your life. Even if you have the power of time and space, you can forget about escaping. Extinction. Rumble. Suddenly, Yi Xian pointed his sword at the sky, as if it had streaked across the vast sky. That strand of nirvanic energy was born at the tip of his finger, and it annihilated the stars in the sky with a bang. He was completely unharmed. Boom! It was as if the 9 heavens were exploding, as if the primal chaos was exploding. Gai Tianyuan's face, which had been laughing wildly, suddenly stiffened. He was completely stupefied. Undying Heaven Lord. The power of Nirvana. You. Gai Tianyuan's face was ghastly pale, and he staggered backward. If Yi Xian's display of the power of time and space had made him feel that Yi Xian was extremely extraordinary, then the appearance of the power of Nirvana had made his soul freeze. This. Gai Tianyuan trembled as he pointed at Yi Xian, unable to speak. An unimaginable terror was assaulting him. The power of time and space, the power of Nirvana, and the power of devouring that seems to be the heaven-devouring demon lord. You, who are you? Gai Tianyuan shrieked in horror. Frightening, too frightening, extremely frightening. Terrifying, the greatest terror since the beginning of time. There were 12 supreme powers in the primal chaos universe, and each of them represented an ancient supreme power. However, Yi Xian actually had 3 supreme powers. This was simply an unprecedented level of terror. Now that it was the 10th Yuan Hui, the primal chaos universe had only produced 10 supreme experts, and there were only 10 supreme powers. However, Yi Xian alone occupied 3 of them. This kind of strange and terrifying thing was simply unbelievable. No, it wasn't just 3. Yi Xian's heaven-devouring technique was the power produced by the Tribulation Transcender technique, while the Tribulation Transcender technique wasn't the power of devouring. There was a huge difference between them. However, in Gai Tianyuan's eyes, he had already regarded Yi Xian's Tribulation Transcender technique as the power of devouring. He also believed that Yi Xian had mastered 3 supreme powers. In Gai Tianyuan's eyes, Yi Xian's identity was simply earth-shattering. You, who are you, what is your relationship with the 3 supreme existences? Gai Tianyuan trembled as he looked at Yi Xian with an extremely frightened expression. Who am I? Yi Xian whispered. The corner of his mouth curved into a smile as he looked up at Gai Tianyuan and said, I am Yi Xian. Although this name isn't very famous now, it will definitely spread throughout the primal chaos universe in the future. Yi Xian. Yi Xian. Gai Tianyuan muttered. His expression changed unpredictably. After several dozen breaths of time, he finally calmed down and stared at Yi Xian with a gloomy expression. There's a rule in the top 10 sects. Anyone who has cultivated the ultimate force is not allowed to join any other ultimate orthodoxy. Yet, you've managed to cultivate 3 ultimate forces. This is clearly a violation of the taboo. Although I don't know how you managed to cultivate 3 ultimate forces, if the top 10 sects were to find out about this, they would definitely not let you off. Gai Tianyuan said grimly. Are you threatening me? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. I wouldn't call it a threat, but I am very interested in your 3 supreme powers. Gai Tianyuan's eyes were burning. He looked at Yi Xian as if he was looking at a peerless treasure. 3 supreme powers. Gai Tianyuan would not believe it if he said that he was not tempted. If he could obtain 3 supreme powers, coupled with his Tianyuan battle physique, he would very likely become the strongest of all time when the 11th Yuanhui began. Although Chaos Star Masters were good and could almost be compared to the strongest of all time, it was only almost. The true rulers of the primal chaos world were the strongest of all time. Even Chaos Star Masters were inferior to them. How could Gai Tianyuan not be tempted? Old thing, if you want to covet my supreme powers, then let's see if you have the ability to do so. Yi Xian smiled coldly. He could see through Gai Tianyuan's thoughts at a glance. However, Yi Xian was not worried. Now that the 2 of them were in the primal chaos trial, they could not casually make a move. Otherwise, they would definitely trigger these restrictions and bring calamity to themselves. Yi Xian, don't be so smug. I want the Chaos Star Master's inheritance, and I also want your supreme powers. Let's wait and see. Gai Tianyuan sneered and ignored Yi Xian. He continued to study the restriction in front of him. You? Yi Xian said coldly. A complete failure. Back then, you became the stepping stone of the Lord of all spirits. Now, you will also become the stepping stone of me, Yi Xian. Yi Xian did not waste any time and began to study the restriction in front of him. The 2 of them were competing to see who could obtain the Chaos Star Master's inheritance first. Chapter 1144. It had to be said that the last 9,999 formations were extremely profound. Just the first formation was enough to stump Yi Xian. 8 shifts, dislocation, and intersecting. How do you break this formation? Yi Xian frowned as he continued to deduce the formation's direction. However, the heaviness in his eyes was extremely dense. Clearly, the formations before him were giving him a headache. Bang! Suddenly, just as Yi Xian was trying his best to comprehend the first formation, Gai Tianyuan advanced again and broke through another formation. What a Gai Tianyuan! He does have some tricks up his sleeve. Yi Xian looked at Gai Tianyuan's back with a sinister glint in his eyes. He was indeed very surprised that Gai Tianyuan could comprehend the formations so quickly. After all, he had not even comprehended the first formation yet. Of course, being shocked was one thing. Yi Xian was not discouraged because he knew that Gai Tianyuan was extremely familiar with the chaotic trial. It was within his expectations that Gai Tianyuan could comprehend the formations so quickly. Time passed extremely quickly. 100,000 years had passed. Gai Tianyuan had already broken through 100 formations and was advancing like a hot knife through butter. On the other hand, Yi Xian had only comprehended 10 formations, which was 10 times the distance between him and Gai Tianyuan. This won't do. Although he's only left with a sliver of his soul, he's still a manifestation realm cultivator. Moreover, he has the heavenly Yuan battle physique and is extremely familiar with the chaotic trial. His comprehension is definitely not below mine. If this continues, the legacy of the chaotic star masters will definitely belong to him, Yi Xian murmured solemnly. Yi Xian knew very well that he was not stupid in terms of comprehension. On the contrary, he was very smart. However, with his current state of comprehension, there was no way he could catch up to Gai Tianyuan. At this moment, Yi Xian truly envied someone, and that person was Lu Bai. He was very certain that if Lu Bai were here, he would definitely surpass Gai Tianyuan in the shortest amount of time possible. After all, Lu Bai's talent was unparalleled throughout history. Unfortunately, Yi Xian knew that he was not Lu Bai. He did not have that kind of talent, so he could only rely on his own efforts to catch up to Gai Tianyuan. This won't do. Every single one of the last 9,000 plus restrictions is different. They can't be compared to the previous restrictions. If I want to comprehend all 9,000 plus restrictions, I'll need at least tens of millions of years. As for this Gai Tianyuan, he has been trapped here for at least 100 million years. He has spent every single day researching the primal chaos trial. This sort of terrifying accumulation is not something that I can catch up to. Yi Xian continued to ponder in his heart. He had already discovered a fact that he had no choice but to accept. Foundation. That's right, Gai Tianyuan's foundation. Gai Tianyuan was a monstrous genius from the same generation as the Lord of all Spirits. Moreover, he possessed the heavenly origin battle body. Be it cultivation talent or comprehension ability, he was absolutely superior. Moreover, Gai Tianyuan had lived for an extremely long time. Whether it was in terms of experience or cultivation, Gai Tianyuan was far superior to Yi Xian. With all of these things added together, there was no way Yi Xian could catch up to him in the primal chaos trial. What to do? Yi Xian's brows were tightly knitted together. His heart grew heavier and heavier as he constantly pondered over various methods. Do I really have to give up? Yi Xian asked himself, then quickly rejected this idea. Such an enormous opportunity was right in front of him. He was unwilling to give it up just like that. No matter what, he had to try. As the saying goes, wealth comes from danger. But despite Yi Xian's ambition, he still wasn't strong enough to catch up to Gai Tianyuan. This caused him to knit his brows and constantly ponder what other methods he could use. Time. I need time. If I have enough time, then even if my comprehension ability isn't as good as Brother White's, I can definitely catch up to Gai Tianyuan, Yi Xian muttered to himself in his sleep. Oh. Suddenly, Yi Xian's expression froze. A light flashed through his eyes, as if he had suddenly thought of something. Time. That's right. Time. I've already cultivated the power of space-time. If I can shorten the time needed to comprehend the array, then wouldn't I be able to catch up to Gai Tianyuan? Yi Xian slapped his forehead. A trace of excitement flashed through his eyes. But before Yi Xian could rejoice, he immediately calmed down and frowned again. But I've only just begun to grasp the power of space-time. And this primal chaos array has its own array. I'm afraid space-time won't be able to interfere with it. This path won't work at all. Yi Xian shook his head in disappointment. Although Yi Xian had rejected this idea, he didn't give up. Thinking of the power of space-time, he continued to ponder along this line of thought. After a few moments, his eyes lit up as he thought of an extremely bold idea. With my current cultivation, I can't stop the primal chaos array at all. But I can stop myself. Yi Xian muttered to himself. Yi Xian's idea was very simple. Since he couldn't stop the space-time of the outside world, then he could stop himself. It was like a year had passed in the outside world, but only a day had passed in his body. And in this day, he would have a year's worth of time to comprehend the primal chaos array before him. However, Yi Xian had never used this method before. He didn't know if this method would work. However, Yi Xian was a daring person. This was the only way for him to quickly comprehend the primal chaos array. He had to take the risk. Rumble. Yi Xian did as he said. The tree of space-time appeared and floated above his head. Strands of space-time power poured down, as if isolating him in an extremely narrow space-time. And this space-time flow was extremely slow. It was a completely different concept from the outside world. It really works. Yi Xian roared excitedly in his heart. However, his body couldn't move. Only his mind was operating normally. Under the effect of time stop, he had slowed himself down by hundreds of times. Time flowed faster than a year. This was enough for Yi Xian to comprehend the primal chaos array. Although his body was frozen, his mind wasn't affected. It was an unimaginable help for him to comprehend the primal chaos array. Comprehend, crazily comprehend. Under the one-year time flow, Yi Xian quickly began to comprehend the array formation before him. In fact, Yi Xian didn't know that his method was the cultivation method of the space-time temple. In the space-time temple, there was a house of time. The flow of time there was 1 to 10,000. The reason why the space-time temple was so terrifying was greatly related to this house of time. Of course, this kind of time-slowing cultivation method wasn't perfect. It only allowed people to comprehend the cultivation method. It didn't increase their cultivation at all. Moreover, this kind of time-slowing cultivation method was extremely taxing on the mind. Too many people couldn't bear this kind of boring cultivation method and went crazy in the house of time. However, this kind of cultivation method was also extremely terrifying. It was a cultivation method that everyone envied. To make a simple analogy, if two people practiced the same cultivation method at the same time, and one person used one day as 10,000 years, his understanding and application of this cultivation method would be terrifying to the extreme. It wasn't something that the other person could compare to. Chapter 1145. At this moment, Yi Xian's situation was a little strange. He stood there without moving, as if he had become a statue. Even his eyes were lifeless. But Yi Xian's mind was working normally. He was constantly comprehending the chaos trial before him. Although his speed was the same as before, only a breath of time had passed in the outside world. On the other side, Gai Tianyuan was gradually comprehending the restriction array. He slightly turned his head to look behind him and discovered that Yi Xian was frozen in place like a puppet. This caused him to sneer and say, "Stinking brat, now you know how terrifying the primal chaos trial is, right? You have to know that I've been researching the primal chaos trial for 200 million years. It's just a fantasy for you to catch up." Another 300 years passed. Boom! A loud sound could be heard. Yi Xian walked out of the first restriction. Gai Tianyuan turned back to look at Yi Xian in shock. He never expected Yi Xian to walk out of the first restriction in just 300 years. "Brat, you only used 100,000 years to walk out of the first 10 restrictions. I've underestimated you," Gai Tianyuan muttered in surprise. Back then, he had used 1,000,000 years to comprehend the first 10 restrictions. But today, Yi Xian only used 100,000 years. This shocked Gai Tianyuan to the core. However, Gai Tianyuan didn't care too much. He was already 10 times ahead of Yi Xian. Moreover, the later restrictions were harder to comprehend. He was confident that he could pass the Chaos Trial and obtain the Chaos Star Master's inheritance. Gai Tianyuan stopped paying attention to Yi Xian and focused on comprehending again. But what happened next completely stunned Gai Tianyuan. He felt as if he had entered a nightmare that he couldn't wake up from. Boom! 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 Another 300 years passed. Yi Xian walked out of the 20th restriction. But this wasn't the end. 500 years later, Yi Xian walked out of the 30th restriction. Another 100 years passed. Yi Xian walked out of the 40th restriction. 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. 5,000 years. 5,000 years was unimaginably long for mortals. But for the chaotic world, 5,000 years was just a snap of the fingers, and for Gai Tianyuan, it was not worth mentioning. But what did he see now? Yi Xian only used 5,000 years to pass through 90 seals. This was simply a fantasy to Gai Tianyuan. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed such a bizarre thing even if he was beaten to death. How is that possible? How is that possible? Gai Tianyuan roared in fear, looking at Yi Xian with eyes full of fear. Even the legendary Chaos Spirit body wouldn't be able to pass through 90 Chaos trials in 5,000 years. Who is he? No, there's no way you can surpass me. Gai Tianyuan howled madly as he once again tried to comprehend the restrictive formations. Unfortunately, before Gai Tianyuan could comprehend the 100th restriction, the sound of restrictions shattering constantly rang out from behind him. Yi Xian was rushing towards the 100th restriction he was in like a hot knife through butter. Damn it! Damn it! Gai Tianyuan couldn't calm down at all. He was completely shocked by Yi Xian's aptitude. At the same time, Yi Xian had arrived at the 99th restriction. As long as he could comprehend this restriction, he would enter the 100th restriction and truly be on the same starting line as Gai Tianyuan. At this moment, Gai Tianyuan was no longer in the mood to comprehend the 100th restriction. He was waiting for Yi Xian's arrival with a murderous look. As long as Yi Xian stepped into the restriction he was in, he would definitely kill Yi Xian. Yi Xian's aptitude had already made Gai Tianyuan feel an unimaginable threat. Gai Tianyuan was even more certain that if he didn't kill Yi Xian, the Chaos Star Master's inheritance would definitely be obtained by this terrifying junior. Killing intent filled the sky and the divine light of creation. Gai Tianyuan stared fixedly at Yi Xian. As long as Yi Xian stepped into the 100th restriction formation, he would kill him without a burial ground. Time passed very quickly. 100 years later, Yi Xian had already stepped into the 100th restriction. Gai Tianyuan's ferocious look was on full display as he raised his 5 fingers. As long as Yi Xian entered completely, he would kill Yi Xian right there and then. Buzz! Yi Xian finally entered the restriction Gai Tianyuan was in. Die! The holy light of creation annihilated everything. Gai Tianyuan roared cruelly and slapped towards Yi Xian's head. Time accelerated by 10,000 times. Yi Xian's body didn't move, as if he was a clay statue. However, his voice reverberated in all directions. In the next instant, Gai Tianyuan's palm had already landed on Yi Xian's head. However, something strange happened. Yi Xian took a step forward and directly entered the 100th restriction. Gai Tianyuan's attack missed completely. Chi. The primal chaos trial was extremely dangerous. Gai Tianyuan's failure to kill Yi Xian directly triggered the backlash of the 100th restriction formation. The primal chaos light that pierced through the sky fell towards him, causing him an unimaginable calamity. Bang! Pfft! The primal chaos light slammed into Gai Tianyuan's body, causing him to spit out blood. Even the holy light of creation around him shattered. Fortunately, Gai Tianyuan could still withstand the backlash of the primal chaos trial. He only suffered some light injuries and didn't lose his life. Yi Xian, you bastard, I will never forgive you. Gai Tianyuan's eyes were as red as blood. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and stared at Yi Xian, who was in the 100th restriction formation. The hatred in his eyes was almost tangible. Puff. On the other side, Yi Xian's body was unsteady. He spat out blood and his face was extremely pale. He collapsed weakly to the ground. Although his eyes had regained their vigor, they were dim and lifeless. No one knew what Yi Xian had experienced in the past 5,000 years. That endless loneliness had almost driven him crazy. In Gai Tianyuan's opinion, Yi Xian had only used 5,000 years to pass through the 100th restriction formation. However, in Yi Xian's consciousness, he had used close to 2 million years to comprehend the 100th restriction formation. 2 million years. Yi Xian was immersed in comprehending the primal chaos trial every day. That kind of dull and endless loneliness constantly gnawed away at his mind. He was mentally and physically exhausted, suffering unspeakably. He was completely isolated from the outside world. Day after day, he studied the formations and restrictions. The pain contained within was almost driving Yi Xian insane. And when he faced Gai Tianyuan's attack, he had slowed down time by 10,000 times. Only then did he step into the 100th restriction formation in an instant. However, it still caused terrifying damage to his mind and will. Fortunately, Yi Xian possessed great willpower that ordinary people didn't possess. He still managed to pull through. However, he needed to properly regulate his breathing. For the time being, he couldn't use time deceleration. Yi Xian, get the hell out here. Get the hell out here. Gai Tianyuan roared madly in the 100th restriction formation. His gaze towards Yi Xian was filled with terrifying killing intent. If he wasn't trapped in the restriction formation, he would have charged towards Yi Xian and turned Yi Xian's bones to dust. Unfortunately, the chaos trial was extremely dangerous. Gai Tianyuan didn't dare to act rashly. He could only roar in anger, but he couldn't do anything to Yi Xian. Trash, let's see how long you can be noisy for. Wait until I obtain the Chaos Star Master's inheritance, I'll definitely let you know how powerful I am. Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He had no intention of paying attention to Gai Tianyuan. Instead, he took out a handful of pills and a sea of chaos spirit stones to repair his damaged mind. Chapter 1146. You dog, I won't let you off. Gai Tianyuan roared at Yi Xian. His chest was about to explode from anger. Unfortunately for him, Yi Xian was already immersed in his cultivation, treating Gai Tianyuan like air. Looking at Yi Xian recovering from his injuries, Gai Tianyuan knew that no matter how much he cursed, it would be useless. He hurried to comprehend the 100th restriction, hoping that he could enter the 100th restriction before Yi Xian recovered. Then, he would turn Yi Xian into ashes. Time flowed like water, passing by in the blink of an eye. In a mere 100 years, Yi Xian used a sea of chaos spirit stones and pills to heal his damaged soul. His complexion was rosy again. Gai Tianyuan, you noisy trash, stay here. I'll go first. Yi Xian scolded and activated time deceleration again, continuing to comprehend the restrictions in front of him. Little dog, you've gone too far. Gai Tianyuan's face was ashen. He was fuming with anger at Yi Xian. In truth, Yi Xian didn't care about arguing. He was trying to provoke Gai Tianyuan. In order to comprehend the chaos trial, one had to remain calm. The angrier Gai Tianyuan was, the harder it would be for him to comprehend the chaos trial. This was Yi Xian's true goal. Boom! 300 years later, Yi Xian entered the next restriction, while Gai Tianyuan was still trapped in the 100th restriction. He roared in anger, no longer in the mood to continue. This was because Gai Tianyuan could tell that Yi Xian was trying to infuriate him. Moreover, the speed at which Yi Xian comprehended the formation was terrifying to the extreme. Even if he tried his best to catch up, he wouldn't be able to catch up to Yi Xian's footsteps. Yi Xian, you bastard, even if I can't obtain the Chaos Star Master's inheritance, don't even think about it. Rumble. Gai Tianyuan punched out with all his cultivation, blasting a hole in the 100th seal. He broke free from the seal and appeared on the mountain path outside. He then shot towards the peak of the mountain. Gai Tianyuan was indeed ruthless. He had decisively given up on the Primal Chaos trial. He wanted to wait for Yi Xian to completely pass the Primal Chaos trial. As long as the inheritance of a Primal Chaos Star Master appeared, he would immediately snatch it and kill Yi Xian. However, would it really be as simple as Gai Tianyuan imagined? On the other side, Yi Xian was still immersed in the Primal Chaos trial. In a state where time had slowed down, he continued to comprehend one restriction array after another. His speed clearly began to increase. 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, 100,000 years. Yi Xian's innate talent and perception were not high, so he used his time to make up for it. He endured unimaginable boredom and studied the grand Tao of array formations every day. Outsiders would not be able to understand the suffering he went through. To make a simple analogy, a person would do the same thing day after day for tens of millions of years. Just thinking about such a terrifying process would make one's scalp go numb. Although only 100,000 years had passed in the outside world, Yi Xian's mind felt that he had endured for more than 30 million years. In these 30 million years, he did nothing but study the Primal Chaos trial. Doing the same thing every day for more than 30 million years was enough to drive anyone crazy. Even if Yi Xian's mind was as firm as a rock, it almost caused him to collapse and die. Fortunately, Yi Xian still managed to endure it. In the Primal Chaos trial, it was not that he did not gain anything. His understanding of array formations had already reached an extremely terrifying level. To make a simple analogy, Liu Bai was known as a peerless genius in the Tao of array formations. No matter what array formation it was in his hands, he would be able to comprehend it by analogy and even innovate and create even more terrifying array formations. At this moment, Yi Xian was 100 times more terrifying than Liu Bai. He only needed a thought to use the power of primal chaos to set up a shocking array formation. Trap, seal, kill, destroy, illusion, confusion, as long as it was a formation, Yi Xian would be able to use it easily. His methods were unpredictable and shocking. These words were not enough to describe how terrifying Yi Xian's mastery of the great Tao of array formations was. There was no such thing as fairness in the world. People were born unequal. Liu Bai had a chaotic spirit body. His aptitude and talent were unprecedented. No matter what technique he learned, he would be able to learn it in one go. Even during his cultivation journey, he did not encounter any hardships. Yi Xian did not have such aptitude, but he was diligent enough. After tens of millions of years, his understanding of the great Tao of array formations in the Primal Chaos trial had already reached an extremely terrifying level. Even Liu Bai could not compare to him. This was the so-called diligence makes up for stupidity. It was also the truest portrayal of Yi Xian. 100,000 years had passed in the outside world, but Yi Xian had experienced 36,500,000 years in the slowing down of time. It was an extremely long and boring period, but it also allowed him to become an array formation grandmaster. At that moment, there were only 10 restrictions left before Yi Xian could pass the Primal Chaos trial. Phew! Yi Xian exhaled a turbid breath. He walked out of the slowing down of time. The last 10 trials could be said to be the 10 great arrays. Only by comprehending these 10 great arrays would he be able to see the Chaos Star Master's inheritance. Wang! Yi Xian sat cross-legged in the void and began to recover his exhausted mind. He wanted to adjust his condition to the peak and pass the Primal Chaos trial in one go. Time passed very quickly. In just 10 years, Yi Xian's condition finally recovered. His essence, energy, and spirit reached the peak. Time slowing down. The tree of spacetime swayed as Yi Xian began to comprehend once again. When he walked out of the slowing down of time, he would pass the primal chaos trial. Peak of empty Tianyuan. Gai Tianyuan sat cross-legged in the void. He had waited for 100,000 years. Every day, apart from recovering his remnant soul, he was waiting for Yi Xian to walk out of the primal chaos trial. In fact, Gai Tianyuan really hoped that Yi Xian would fail. However, there seemed to be a voice in the unseen world telling him that Yi Xian would definitely pass the primal chaos trial. Gai Tianyuan believed in his intuition because Yi Xian's methods left him flabbergasted. It also made him feel an extreme sense of dread. Not to mention the three supreme powers, just Yi Xian's speed of comprehending the primal chaos trial shocked him. Gai Tianyuan was very sure that even if the myriad spirit heaven lord were to pass the primal chaos trial, he definitely wouldn't be able to compare to Yi Xian. What kind of monster is this guy? How can he comprehend the primal chaos trial so quickly? Gai Tianyuan muttered to himself as great dread flashed across his eyes. Wait. All Gai Tianyuan could do was wait. Regardless of whether Yi Xian succeeded or failed, he had to kill Yi Xian because Yi Xian actually made him feel uneasy. Yi Xian was the second person to make him feel uneasy, and the first person was the Lord of all spirits from back then. Impressive kid. I have to say that if it weren't for the fact that you only have a mortal body, I would have believed you to be the next Yuan Hui, Gai Tianyuan murmured with mixed feelings. Rumble. Suddenly, the sky above the Tianyuan kingdom darkened. Terrifying bolts of primal chaos lightning streaked across the sky. The countless bolts of lightning wreaked havoc as if they were about to shatter the world. A primal chaos mutation. Has he really passed the primal chaos trial? Gai Tianyuan rose to his feet in shock. He stared at the dark, lightless sky, and was completely dumbfounded. Chapter 1147. At the same time. It wasn't just the Tianyuan kingdom that was changing. The sky of the entire chaotic world dimmed as terrifying chaos lightning wreaked havoc across the world. The earth-shattering sound of thunder made all living beings in the chaotic world tremble. Central region, Myriad Spirit Palace. A milky white figure stood with his hands behind his back. His entire body was covered by a milky white halo, making it impossible for others to see his appearance. Lord of all spirits. The strongest of the 10th Ian, who had been in charge of the 10th Ian for 183 million years. He was the strongest person in the 10th Ian. The chaotic star master of this Ian has appeared. The Lord of all spirits muttered hoarsely before slowly shaking his head. No matter who becomes a chaotic star master, they will have to listen to my orders. I hope you won't oppose me. Men. Lord. A young girl covered in spiritual light walked out of the void and knelt before the Lord of all spirits. Violet Spirit, help me find the new chaotic star master and bring him to the Myriad Spirit Palace. I want to see him, the Lord of all spirits said calmly. As you command, Lord. The young girl Violet Spirit kowtowed before disappearing from the Myriad Spirit Palace in a purple light. With chaos as the chessboard and all living beings as chess pieces, the chaotic star master is known as the chess player. However, even the 10th Ian has submitted to me. Even the chaotic star master is no exception, the Lord of all spirits muttered. At the same time. The other 9 supreme temples also had huge changes, but these changes were extremely weak and disappeared without a trace. After all, the 10th Ian was under the control of the Myriad Spirit Palace. The 9 supreme temples were aloof from worldly affairs. As long as they weren't implicated, they naturally wouldn't make any big moves. Tianyuan Kingdom. Lightning covered the sky as the sky exploded. Terrifying stars rotated in the sky, pouring down endless starlight that drowned the entire Tianyuan kingdom. Chaotic star power. Is this the legendary chaotic star power that only chaotic star masters can control? Gai Tianyuan trembled as he roared. He was in an extremely excited state. Rumble. The sky gradually cracked open, and a simple and unadorned stone book fell down. This stone book shone with resplendent starlight, and it was so dazzling that people couldn't open their eyes. The inheritance of a Chaos Star Master. Gai Tianyuan's eyes were bloodshot as he let out an excited roar. He turned into a streak of light and shot toward the stone book. He clearly wanted to take the Chaos Star Master's inheritance for himself. Chi! Something strange happened. Gai Tianyuan's palm actually passed through the stone book. It was as if the stone book was just a mass of air that he couldn't touch. What's going on? How could this be? The Chaos Star Master inheritance was right in front of him, yet Gai Tianyuan couldn't get it. This made his eyes turn red as he roared furiously. Rumble. Suddenly, Tong Tian's starlight fell from the stone book. Yi Xian slowly walked out of the primal chaos trial. He faced the starlight and walked through the sky. He only stopped when he appeared beside the stone book. This is the inheritance of a Chaos Star Master. Yi Xian's eyes lit up. Something shocking happened. Yi Xian gently held the stone book in his hand. Extremely dazzling starlight covered it. An indescribable aura erupted from Yi Xian's body. Desolate, vast, and indescribable majestic aura were all emitted from Yi Xian's body. Little thief, put down the stone book. Suddenly, Gai Tianyuan crazily roared as a terrifying divine light of creation crazily smashed towards Yi Xian. From the looks of it, it seemed as if he wanted to tear Yi Xian apart. Something strange happened again. Gai Tianyuan's attack directly passed through Yi Xian's body. It was as if Yi Xian was a mass of air and couldn't cause any damage to him. No, it wasn't that Yi Xian was air. It was that Yi Xian and Gai Tianyuan didn't even exist in the same world. They were so close yet worlds apart. Although Gai Tianyuan could see Yi Xian and the stone book, Yi Xian was in the world of the Chaos Trial. This was also why the Chaos Trial was so terrifying. Not to mention that Gai Tianyuan was only at the creation stage. Even if he was at his peak, he wouldn't be able to harm Yi Xian in the slightest. Clearly, if someone passed the Chaos Trial would protect that person. How could it allow someone to kill them halfway? Unless Gai Tianyuan passed the Chaos Trial like Yi Xian, he wouldn't be able to touch Yi Xian at all. Unfortunately, Gai Tianyuan would never have this chance. At this moment, Gai Tianyuan also came to a realization. His eyes were scarlet red as he stared at Yi Xian. His steel teeth creaked as he looked at Yi Xian. He wished he could eat his flesh and drink his blood. Little thief, the Chaos Star Master inheritance is mine. Come out and give it to me right now, and I'll let you live. Gai Tianyuan roared. Idiot. Yi Xian held the stone book in his hand and didn't even look at Gai Tianyuan. He treated him like air and started reading the stone book in his hand. Wah! Gai Tianyuan spat out a mouthful of blood due to anger. At this moment, Gai Tianyuan wanted to slap himself twice. His heart was filled with regret. It was as if he had personally given the Chaos Star Master inheritance to Yi Xian. If he had known that Yi Xian could pass the Chaos Trial, he wouldn't have told Yi Xian about the Chaos Star Master's secret. Mine. This stone book is mine. Wah! Gai Tianyuan clutched his chest and roared in grief. Blood couldn't help but spurt out of his mouth. He was actually angered by Yi Xian to the point that he suffered internal injuries and even showed signs of going berserk. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't pay any attention to Gai Tianyuan. All his attention was on the stone book in his hand. His eyes were shining as if he had discovered a peerless treasure. Yi Xian muttered in astonishment, his eyes shining brightly. He was clearly shocked by the contents of the stone book. Chaos as the plate, stars as the seed. What arrogance! You don't have to be so smug, little thief. This chaos trial can last for 10,000 years at most. After 10,000 years, the chaos trial will disappear. It will only reappear in the chaos universe when the 11th Aeon opens. I advise you to give me the stone book now. Otherwise, I'll take your life after 10,000 years. Gai Tianyuan roared crazily. Oh! Yi Xian finally retracted his gaze from the stone book and put it back into his pouch. Only then did he look at Gai Tianyuan. I would have forgotten if you didn't mention it. Thank you for the reminder. Yi Xian chuckled, then sat down cross-legged. A heavenly yuan pill appeared in his hand and was swallowed by Yi Xian in a single gulp. Gai Tianyuan instantly understood when he saw Yi Xian swallow the pill. Clearly, Yi Xian wanted to become a sacred king within 10,000 years. It's useless. Even if you become a sacred king, you'll still die at my hands. Gai Tianyuan roared furiously. Unfortunately, Yi Xian ignored Gai Tianyuan's threat. The heaven origin pill in his body had already exploded. A terrifying energy surged through his body. Chapter 1148. Like a surging sea or a volcanic eruption, Yi Xian's body swelled like a rubber ball. Terrifying veins squirmed all over his body. His skin turned fiery red as if it was about to explode. His accumulation and potential were limitless. The roar of a sea of thunder exploded in Yi Xian's body. An extremely terrifying aura burst out in all directions with Yi Xian as the center. Spiderweb-like cracks appeared in all directions as if the world was about to collapse. The primary heaven pill was as famous as the heaven-mending pill. The energy it contained was extremely pure. It washed over Yi Xian's body like a vast sea, causing him to undergo a qualitative transformation. Roar! Yi Xian suddenly roared. An extremely terrifying aura rolled out from his mouth. Even Gai Tianyuan, who was outside, had a drastic change in expression. He looked at Yi Xian with shock in his eyes. What a terrifying power! Gai Tianyuan muttered to himself in shock and anger. He couldn't believe that Yi Xian, who was just an ordinary person, could display such terrifying power in order to break through to the Saint King realm. This kid's cultivation foundation is terrifyingly deep. Even when I broke through to the Saint King realm, I didn't have such a terrifying aura. But he's just an ordinary person. How can he cultivate to such a level? The more he interacted with Yi Xian, the more Gai Tianyuan couldn't see through Yi Xian. He only felt that Yi Xian was like a fog that brought him too much shock and amazement. Rumble. Yi Xian's body was exploding. Chaotic holy light circulated. His face alternated between red and purple as if he was enduring some kind of pain. In fact, it was an extremely long process to break through from the Great Saint realm to the Saint King realm. It was a gradual process. Logically speaking, if an ordinary great saint took the primary heaven pill, they would need to slowly refine it. This was because the primary heaven pill's medicinal properties were extremely overbearing. If they absorbed it too quickly, it would damage their inner palace. It would take at least 50,000 years. However, Yi Xian was different. The chaotic trial would disappear in 10,000 years. Therefore, he had to refine the primary heaven pill within 10,000 years and step into the Saint King realm in one fell swoop. Only then could he resist Gai Tianyuan's killing intent. Fortunately, Yi Xian had passed the chaotic holy tribulation. His body was abnormally strong. Although the primary heaven pill's medicinal properties were overbearing, it couldn't damage his inner palace. 10,000 years was enough for him to step into the Saint King realm. So, time quickly passed. The 10,000-year period was about to arrive. The primal chaos smelting trial also began to shake, as if it would disappear at any moment. Damned thief, I will definitely cut you into 8 pieces. Feeling the changes in the primal chaos trial, Gai Tianyuan's face went wild with joy. He fiercely glared at Yi Xian as an extremely terrifying killing intent emanated from him. Boom! The chaotic trial finally disappeared and Yi Xian's figure appeared. However, at that moment, a thunderous roar erupted from Yi Xian's mouth. Break! Crack! Some sort of shackle within Yi Xian's body shattered, and an extremely terrifying aura exploded out from his body. Strands of Saint King power circulated around his body, and he finally stepped into the Saint King realm at this critical moment. So what if you've stepped into the Saint King realm? I'll make sure you die a horrible death today. Gai Tianyuan roared ferociously. He didn't care if Yi Xian was a great saint or a Saint King realm. As long as Yi Xian didn't surpass the creation realm, he would definitely kill him. Primary Heaven Finger. Buzz! Gai Tianyuan roared coldly. A golden light appeared on his fingertip and he pointed it at Yi Xian. Bang! Something extremely frightening happened. Gai Tianyuan's finger shattered the space. The golden light seemed to be able to destroy everything. It was as if it was going to turn Yi Xian into ashes in the next moment. Square heaven and square earth. Yi Xian's expression didn't change. He tapped the void with the tip of his foot and retreated continuously. A spot of chaotic starlight appeared on his fingertip and drew mysterious runes in front of him. Qi! 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 Heaven and earth turned upside down. A terrifying formation appeared in front of Yi Xian. The formation runes intertwined with starlight like a prison and pressed down on Gai Tianyuan. Bang! The starlight prison and the heavenly origin finger collided. After an earth-shattering explosion, the two great techniques shattered into smoke. However, the terrifying shockwaves that blossomed from the collision sent the two of them flying backwards. Is this all you've got? Yi Xian put his hands behind his back and looked at Gai Tianyuan with disdain. Grand Array Technique? Gai Tianyuan's face darkened. Yi Xian's attack was a skill he had learned in the Primal Chaos trial. He didn't expect Yi Xian to use it on him. Gai Tianyuan also knew how to draw a formation out of thin air. Although he hadn't passed the Primal Chaos trial, he had walked through more than 9,000 formations. This kid couldn't be allowed to live. Gai Tianyuan roared in fear. Yi Xian could already draw a formation out of thin air without cultivating the Primal Chaos Star Master's inheritance. If he cultivated the stone book, Gai Tianyuan was afraid that he wouldn't be able to stop him. Kill! Gai Tianyuan was no longer at his peak, but he was now in the creation realm. This was a full realm higher than Yi Xian. He didn't believe that he couldn't kill Yi Xian. Nirvana. Once Yi Xian became a Saint King, he wouldn't compromise. He used the power of Nirvana to kill Gai Tianyuan in one fell swoop. Little dog, if you had the Nirvana battle body, with the Nirvana power you just cultivated, I might be afraid of you. But with your mortal body, you want to use the Nirvana power to fight me? You are still far from it. Infinite Sky Primordial. Gai Tianyuan roared. He put his hands together and formed a semicircle. A terrifying golden light covered him as he charged at Yi Xian. The Sky Primordial battle body wasn't one of the 12 strongest battle bodies in the Primal Chaos, but it was still one of the most difficult bodies to deal with. Gai Tianyuan didn't think much of Yi Xian, but he was still wary of the power of Nirvana. He quickly dodged Yi Xian's attack and used the grand art of Tianyuan to attack Yi Xian. It was a fight to the death. Gai Tianyuan wasn't the only one who wanted to kill Yi Xian. Yi Xian wanted to kill Gai Tianyuan too. Yi Xian didn't want to be passive. The reason was simple. Yi Xian had the power of time and space and the power of Nirvana. These were his biggest secrets. Now that he had obtained the inheritance of a Chaos Star Master, if Gai Tianyuan walked out of the outside world alive and exposed his secret to the public, all the living beings in the Primal Chaos world would probably kill him. Similarly, Yi Xian also knew Gai Tianyuan's true identity. Gai Tianyuan couldn't let Yi Xian expose his identity. Otherwise, the 10,000 Spirit Palace wouldn't let him go. Bang! 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 Heaven and earth shook. The light was dazzling. Every blow from the two caused the void to shatter. The entire Tianyuan kingdom was gradually reduced to ruins as the two fought. Tianyuan finger. Great demonic fist. Fist and finger collided, causing heaven and earth to shatter. The two of them fought in a frenzy, using all sorts of vicious killing methods in order to kill the other. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.